あ、ここいるんだ。
本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
I miss you.
What's good, Internet? It's December 16th.
Not your apartment.
2022. And you're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 531. I'm your host, Rob Zachney, and I'm joined by Ricardo Contreras. Patrick Klepek. Well, I guess
Crisped. Whatever
maybe it's
whatever
kind
just
of
happened.
Yeah.
I'd have to go too loud. I don't know what does a mouse sound like. Anyway,
Yeah. And Renata Price.
You know what, Rob? If it makes you feel any better, my home is also saturated with mice. Does that help?
I mean, it's good to know that we stand in solidarity.
Exactly.
That we are
Exactly.
both
There you go.
that we are both fighting that.
okay, but this has been a problem for a little while now. It's come up here and there, and then when Rob has to send a message to our managers to be like, "I have to deal with something," I've said to myself, "We have reached an inflection point." And then you were tweeting, and I was like, "Oh, the frustration is pure and raw," and I need you to walk me through what happened yesterday.
Okay, so there's been a shift in mouse nocturnal patterns of late, where they're running now onto, and it's weird this hasn't happened before, but they are now during the night they're running onto the kitchen counters and such.
So it's not as though like, hey, sometimes when the temperature drops, that's going to change the the attitude of the animals.
So
for
two
some reason.
things did happen. Like, autumn arrived, and then a neighbor did a huge gut renovation, which like tons of people in the building have talked about. Like there was an exodus of mice from that unit, which basically sat empty for about a year and a half.
Okay.
So we do not know how many mice were in there. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where it was effectively an abandoned double unit. That like the snowbirds who lived there took forever selling it. And so like God knows how many were in there. And that pushed a bunch all around the building. And this building is like completely Swiss cheesed with holes and gaps. So it's a difficult situation. But it was like sort of contained where it's like, okay, we know we got a bunch of them. They're like being annoying and running around the floors at night, etc. This is partly like why it's been escalating, right? We're like, okay, we need to put traps down.
Well, we went from ethical traps. I feel like this is one of the last places we left it, where we were just. I was talking about how I had a couple in the garage, got some of the ethical traps, and like brought them out. You know, you just take them like a mile away, drop them off.
Hold on. You're talking about non-lethal. Lethal is also ethical.
Can you but I mean, this is on this ideology.
But I believe your partner like was at the point where like, you know what?
She is now telling me we need to get glue traps, and I'm holding the line.
Okay. Have they gotten into your food yet?
Well, no, because we knew the building had such mice issues a while ago. We had them get into a lot of food in the pantry, like fairly early in the pandemic. Okay. And so like, that's like, we have a huge storage problem because everything is like in a big plastic tub, et cetera. So like food is pretty safe, but of late they have started like coming onto the kitchen counter. And like, that's a food prep area. You don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, so every day now for the last week or so, my day starts with having to take everything off the kitchen counter, spray everything down, and then put it back. Because it's just got to be, you don't know where they've been, but you know they've been up there, etc.
You got to get a camera. You got to get a camera.
Oh, maybe I do need a camera.
Just buy a cheap one. You don't have to get like a Nest or whatever, unless
you
want to use this.
Get a really expensive camera.
But you have an extra.
I was gonna say, I shouldn't have said this because he could just buy a $20 like cheapo one that like don't put on a guest network, you know. But I feel like you're gonna end up spending like $250 on like a 4 camera.
Well, hold on. I've got the Sony, and I've got under cabinet lighting I could leave on low. I would bet you the Sony can push at least well enough to see like where those fuckers are coming in from.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Oh, but I bet you the Sony wouldn't work because like a little like trail cam night vision thing would have a big memory card where it could just record all night. And like the Sony's not going to be good for that.
Or not even have to worry about you could pay for cloud storage thing for $10 for 1 month and not even worry about any local storage. But something to look into if it continues to just it could get a sense of like where they are coming from. I have a similar, so I don't have a mice problem, but I have a fly problem. But it's not like a problem, but clearly some flies got into some business somewhere in the house, no idea where, cannot figure out where they're coming from. But every day there's at least 2 flies that I need to swat. Wake up the next day, there'll be 2 more flies.
That's annoying as hell.
2 more flies. You know, I had a fly birthing issue, reproduction issue in our laundry room. I think I've told that story on the podcast before, where there was like 100 of them in the laundry room. That's gross, but I was easy enough to take care of. Put in these strips, shut the door, come back in a day later. I don't know what to do with these. Like, I assume I'm just slowly killing a population of flies, and at some point they'll stop appearing.
Well, sort of. So I will say this: we've been like, it turns out the little like quick electric kill traps, like they've been working really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that would have diminished the mouse activity meaningfully. Like, we're talking like pretty routine, like, oh, like, you know, trap got another one.
They're like my flies. It's just the
How
next
many per day?
Like, we are talking about like a kill or 2 per day.
Hey, Patrick.
A kill or 2 per day?
I mean, if they've just been repopulating unchecked in the walls of an apartment for a year and a half, I mean, I don't know. I can't crunch the numbers. I feel like someone can write in and tell us, but like, it wouldn't shock me if there were 100, right? Like, I'm just pulling a number out of my ass. Like, would that be wild to imagine that over the course of a year and a half?
I mean, and the other thing is that because there is no like hard separation between the units, I would bet you across this building, there's probably hundreds.
Right.
It's because it's a huge building. So like, but you would think at this point they would have gotten the message that like, hey, when
don't go into this one. When Jeff didn't come back last night.
when mice follow the smell of delicious peanut butter into this one particular like room, we tend not to see those mice again. But that's not sinking in. And so like again, yeah, this is how bad the problem is in the building is we're like, you know, the traps are working, and it is not like diminishing the activity. But yeah, yesterday, opened some drawers where you do not want to find little mouse leavings. And it was a moment where it's like, okay, I now have to unpack basically all my kitchen because we will not be able to eat until I handle this problem. And so I've got to unpack the entire kitchen, wash everything, and spend a lot of the day like crawling into we'd sealed up a lot of the obvious places where they're coming from. So this was a day of like, okay, what are the non-obvious places they could be operating? But you know, the further you look into these things, the more you start to realize there's no like the way this apartment is. There's just no winning. Yeah. The big issue is that building services run down 12 stories. So water, ventilation, electric all come up through the shaft in my kitchen, between the kitchen and like this crawl space. That runs down 12 stories. And that's just they just kind of installed cabinetry in front of a big hole in the wall that they left for all these services to come through. And then to top that off, one of the cabinets, the corner cabinet, doesn't have an interior wall. So I'm sticking my head in there, and now my head is fully in the cabinet, like next to the sink, and I lean around the corner, and now I am staring into like the black abyss of like this gap between it and the sink cabinet. Mm-hmm. And that runs all the way around the corner back to this giant hole that runs through the building. So there's like a 4-foot hole in a cabinet that feeds into like another enormous hole that runs the length of the building. And even if I seal the hole in the cabinetry, they have now like penetrated so many of the cabinets that like they basically have unfettered access from the building wide services chase to anywhere in my apartment.
Isn't this like at the point where collective action should occur and that everyone should just pour some money into hiring somebody to escalate matters? Now, granted, that doesn't stop, you know, mice coming back another time, but clearly there is a centralized hub that could maybe use some cleaning up.
The building has exterminator contract, but it is also just like the mice of Lowell had 50 years to make their homes in abandoned mill buildings around the downtown. And so it is like the situation can never be fixed completely. It can be mitigated. But so the building does stuff, and then it's kind of on you to harden your unit as best you can.
Yeah, I mean, with my mice, when we call an exterminator, a man shows up with a couple pieces of metal, cuts them up, and then just glues them over holes in the wall and goes, "Okay, bye," and then walks out within like 35 seconds. Like that is the extermination process, at least in my experience.
So we have an exterminator, a very small fellow, very nice, very polite, shows up, and he crawls around in the tiniest little spaces you never think to get to. And he's got a real mind for it. And he really he's thinking like that. Yeah, he is. He's like, you know, if I were
Would you describe him as mousy?
Pardon?
Would you describe him as mousy?
Maybe not mousy, but like a bit rodentine, certainly. And so we have a contract now with this exterminator. They come back regularly to like exchange traps, clean up, see how progress is going. But his like basic final word on it was like, there's limits to what we can do with this situation. until we get at these like structural parts of your unit.
Have you considered that you may just be living in the apartment from Silent Hill 4 The Room? Because I feel like that is what you're describing here at times, and I think that's tough. That's going to be hard to fix if you do have a portal to Silent Hill in your cabinet.
I think so. We have discussed, like, is this just kind of a cursed unit? Is it a place maybe we've outgrown and we delete all messages of the mouse problem off social media and then sell this unit and move somewhere else. But, it also occurred to me, this could be an opportunity.
Uh-huh.
Because if you're saying, like, what I'm being told is this problem can only be solved by getting down to the like foundational structural elements of this unit.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Rob.
And so suddenly it's like we have no choice, but at least to like, put in new cabinetry and maybe refresh that kitchen. Bring things up to the standard of an induction range. And from like,
have you gotten a quote for any of that yet?
Yeah, bro.
I talked to a counter and cabinets guy like earlier this year.
Okay.
It's a small unit, so it's not that bad. That's the thing. This is not a very big house. And so like I had been expecting that it was going to be just a ridiculous number. It was not a ridiculous number.
I don't know what your definition of that is. That I
What is
have
the line?
no idea what that line is.
Okay,
Not trying to blow up your spot. You don't need to share the number. I'm just saying.
But like I'd always heard stuff like, oh, you can spend like $40,000 on a kitchen or more.
Well,
if it's like
a kitchen, right? Like
Yeah.
the kitchen in my house, just because it's like bigger and it's in like a proper house, that's essentially your baseline would start at 30 grand and go up.
And that's kind of what I was expecting to hear here. And when I told him the square footage and all that, and like, we'd be talking in terms of, counter space, etc. No, it's much more like in the, $10,000.
Here's the I remember when you replaced your dishwasher, wasn't one of the issues that when it was pulled out, other issues were discovered. Is there a risk here of the best of intentions to replace this, to get things better, but maybe, just maybe what you have, Rob, is just barely holding things back? It is a big Band-Aid. It's got holes in it. But if you were to remove that, one would discover much worse things hiding underneath.
It is possible. Like that is what happens if we pull up the floor, for instance.
This is what happens every time in my house. The people that we bought the house from consider themselves amateurs, to like amateur contractors. And I did just enough to aesthetically cover up things. But the moment you scratch beneath the surface, like basically every time we have a new issue in the house and I have a new someone to come out and deal with something, whether it's a pipe or whatever, almost every time they have turned to me with deep apprehension and said, "Did you do this yourself?" And I have to explain every time, whatever issue you are describing, no, I didn't. But the person who owned this house before absolutely did. Like we had a like the place where you connect your hose out in front, just started bursting some water. And so, turned that off and was like, well, I wonder, you start with, I wonder if I can fix that myself. And based on my diagnosis of the problem, I looked up a YouTube video and it involved like buying metals from Home Depot and blowtorching them, which is very much like, okay, that is beyond me unscrewing a thing and putting it back on. And so I had a plumber come out to take a look at it. And I mean, his eyes went wide as he started taking it apart. He's like, "What is this putty on here?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "This is not what what? You take the putty off and then the pipe just moves back and forth. It's supposed to be in place somehow." And I'm like, I don't know. This happens every time in this house. And we've been fortunate. It's never been anything catastrophic. It is mostly minor issues that result in somewhere between like $500 to $1,000 of a repair. I don't know. Every 6 months. I'm not saying that's great. I'm not like cheering for this, but it is not the case where like we've had something burst and cause home insurance level damage. So like that can happen in houses. So I it's annoying. Like every time I look at an outlet and like I touch it and it can spin. Most recently, we went into my youngest daughter's room and we're changing the sheets on her bed, and it happened to move the bed, and her bed's a little lower at the moment. And it was like, why is there a pool of water down there? That could be for any number of reasons. That could be because she brings her water bottle in there and like the cap was loose or she was playing with it. No, you pull it aside and it turns out like part of the, not the flooring, but like, what do you call it? Like the little stuff that runs along the bottom of the wall. Like
the baseboard?
Yeah, it's like near that area. But like things were not lined up properly. And basically there was a hole to winter that was sitting there, blasting cold air up against a mattress. So that what the cold air was coming in, condensing, and then creating water in that area. So it was as simple as me going to buy caulk and like fixing fixing that.
Christ.
But like that is like a constant sort of minor emergency that occurs in the house once every 6 months. It's like, oh, those fuckers that sold us this house. I'm glad they didn't do anything horrible to it, but it is just a escalating series of, I really wish you had just paid people to do this, because now I'm paying people to do it for me.
I'm like, to me, it feels like all the stuff held up okay since the building was converted in the 80s. But at some point, someone's going to end up holding the bag for all the shit that's just like piling up with the units in the building. And it turns out it's me. It turns out that I am the person who, like, building's been standing here for like 25 years. And I'm the person who's like, this can't be deferred anymore, because now this has been rendered into a giant mouse terrarium that is as fit for mice as it is for people. And that's a problem. Now, I was starting thinking about this. I was getting really depressed last night. I spent a lot of day yesterday being really depressed. Because, you get in your feelings when you spend the entire day, like your eyes are irritated from allergies, you're breathing all sorts of cleaning fumes, etc. But then it occurred to me, like, this is a beautiful opportunity. And that's just how you got to look at this. This is my time to show what I can achieve, like with interior design and decor. This is my moment to create something beautiful that I will enjoy living in, and that I'm sure other people will be like, I will pay a 25% market premium over, the value of a similar home because of these choices that this renowned estate that owned this unit made when he was renovating it.
Does it also mean that we'll be able to do a stream where we watch you look at cabinets?
Yes.
Okay. Then I'm on board. Let's go.
Rob, I just want to say I'm really proud of you for pushing back on those cognitive distortions.
I think I beat them. I was spiraling, but now I think I've got the right framework. It's an opportunity. It's a blessing, really. And if we can figure out how to get the money to do this, that would be, I think we could really do something here.
I think we're 40. I'm going to say, if Rob has a really bad year, we're 1 year away from Rob becoming the protagonist of a Coen Brothers film. I think that the mice infestation feels to me like the step one.
This is the tipping
in a
point.
Coen Brothers. Yeah. This is the instigating moment.
Well, I think
I just start a little gambling stream to get some extra money. There's a couple that Twitch seems okay with, and it's a little unethical. But look at these cabinets, readers.
Rob, I know a guy who runs underground poker games for a living. I can put you in
now
contact.
We're just doing Michael Clayton. And I do love Michael Clayton. And I I've always considered myself, I am not one of those people that shit's always falling out of the sky around. So yeah, let's fucking do it. Let's hook me up with those underground poker games, and get me a kitchen. I will say this: the thing that does appeal to me is like I have not lived in a place, basically ever, where like Patrick, you're talking about like, boy, this outlet sure is loose. This floor sure is not just not unlevel. It's like weird and warped, and like there's places where the laminate flooring is just like sort of pouched up, and you like. I get a weird like floating motion sickness when I pass over some steps because it's like you're on solid floor and then it's like you're on a waterbed for like a split second.
Oh, there was part of my the whole infrastructure of the front door yesterday. I leaned out to grab my mail and like something budged a bit, and I'm like, I'm just gonna ignore that. That seems like a problem, but I'm not gonna tell my wife that happened, and we're just gonna wait till that's a bigger problem and not lean against the door in the future.
This like parts of this building. There's like the door is not hung on a frame. They didn't frame out a doorway. They took drywall. They used carpenter's nails to tap trim into the drywall around the door, and they hung the door off the trim.
Nice.
What?
This is what we are talking about.
Nice.
This is my home. Why is this place filled with fucking mice? Anyway, listen. So we have a bit of a special show for you. In a little bit, we are going to bring you an interview Patrick and I did with Robert Ashley, the host and producer of A Life Well Wasted, which is a terrific video game, like almost documentary podcast that has been on a mostly unplanned hiatus for about a decade, but which just released a new episode this week. But first, I always say people should follow Renata Price at Renner Raven on Twitter.com because you will get breaking news updates like this. Shem, the gem-loving, formerly negative 1 years old dwarven child.
Shit.
She sadly had to be killed after transforming into a werebeast, attacking and killing 4 people. Thoughts and prayers to Renata's Dwarfhold. Thoughts and prayers to all the Shem fans and Shem stans that are out there. But Ren, the whole world loved Shem, the gem-loving negative 1 year old who evidenced a complete lack of empathy for other living beings. Can you explain what happened, and how is it that your Dwarfhold in Dwarf Fortress is not overrun with werebeasts?
So, last podcast, I would say minutes after recording, I checked on my little Dwarfhold. And a werepanda did attack.
Panda? Wow.
Yeah, werepanda. Yeah. A werepanda did attack. Didn't kill anyone because I had a very, very well-trained military. The Miners Corps that we've discussed previously managed to run out and one-shot the werepanda after the werepanda attacked 4 people.
Okay.
Attacked and maimed 4 people, 3 of whom were bitten, 1 of whom was just like torn up. So the 3 people who were bitten were a gem cutter, Shem, the child, and then a recruit in the military. And so those were the 3 people bitten. And then there was a month period where I was like, I know these people are definitely werebeasts. I'm pretty sure these people are going to turn next year. I have to find some way to contain them when that happens. And I did not do that fast enough. Is what I'll say. That process did not occur even close to as soon as you needed it to. And so, when the next full moon came, Shem was down in the caverns underneath our fortress because children can just roam unsupervised. And so Shem had wandered into the caverns below the fortress, where, like, to be clear, monsters live. We had just killed like 4 monsters down there. It's like a problem. And this child was wandering around down there. They turned into a werepanda. And then The problem was they turned into a werepanda right near the stairs, which are the only way in and out of the caverns. And so other dwarves would have to be like, well, time to carry this bundle of gems or like bundle of stone up the stairs. Let's go, team. And then we'd have to walk past Shem, the werepanda, who killed 4 people.
No.
Shem did kill 4 people just straight up. Had the highest KD of any of the werepandas. The other ones went down really quick because the mining core was right next to them. The miners' core were fast.
But she found
on the
herself a
scene.
little lair. She went where the monsters
Yes.
live and became one herself.
Yes, she produced a lair. That is exactly what happened. And so I did have to send down a recently trained, and by recently trained, I mean the woman had been training in the military for about 3 days. And so I did send her down to fight Shem, and it didn't go great. She didn't die. And you know what? That's the important part.
Well, I mean, given what happens to werebeast bites, though, sometimes it's better if people do die. Are we
Yes.
confident that?
100%. 100%. There's like 4 more infected people. It's going to be a problem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
this is becoming a spiraling issue.
okay.
Just to so
So is the
for
plan?
those
Are
of
you
who
gonna try to pen them in? Can you like
no
trap them?
I'm going to produce a secret 5th branch of the dwarven military.
Okay, so we're Men in Blacking the
yes.
Dwarfold.
Yes, there will be another branch of the dwarven military made up entirely of survivors of werebeast attacks, who I can then, when the full moon comes, set them on patrol or to station in like a little room and then lock that fucking door. But the rest of the year, I'm going to have those motherfuckers doing military training year round because I cannot trust them to not do shit, to do other shit and potentially not be in the room I can lock when I need them to be.
Well, that sounds
Rob, you look
incredible.
disconcerted.
I can't see any ways that
Yeah, this is
the
gonna go great.
werebeast commando
Now, will they?
regiment
When you
could
lock
go
them all
wrong.
in this room, well, do they all
Yeah.
turn simultaneously?
Yes.
Okay. Are they gonna
I
start
don't
fighting each other?
They'll kill each other. I don't think they'll kill each
This is
other
gonna be-
because I believe werebeasts treat each other as friendly.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. When werebeasts turn back into humans, there is a short period where they are still enraged. So there may be a small chance that while still enraged, the entire unit will kill each other.
Good. Great. Can you?
Beautiful.
By the
Can you
way,
put them into individual cells?
yeah, I could probably do that.
like bed chambers that you
I
can
tried
lock?
to do that. I tried to do
but
that.
The problem is
but I couldn't
escalating
get them in
beyond the
there.
capacity to build prisons for this. I think too is kind of what it
Yeah,
sounds like.
this
Like,
is past work orders, right? Like you can't get them in there at a certain time on purpose.
No.
You have to like manually be like, "Hey,
yeah.
Are you in
here's
there?
The thing, you can't manually tell your dwarves to do anything. That's part of the
Well,
thing about
you-
Dwarf Fortress is that,
can-
like, as opposed to other colony sims where you can tell someone go walk in. If I play RimWorld, I can tell someone go walk into
Yeah.
this room and do this task. You cannot do that in Dwarf Fortress. You just have to give work orders in such a way where their manager gives them the right order at the right time.
I was gonna say, can you set up a burrow for them to? Because I feel like you could turn burrows on and off.
They don't listen to burrows. Dwarves don't listen to burrows. Who are we fucking kidding? Burrows are a thing in Dwarf Fortress where you can basically say, I want these dwarves to only stay in these areas generally. They can leave to go to other areas, but generally I want them to be living and working in these 2 floors, for example. But here's the thing, those are suggestions.
Yeah, it's too porous.
Right.
Well,
the only thing...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, please.
go for it.
I was gonna say, the only thing they really listen to is emergency civilian alerts. Like if you set up a bunker for civilians to go into, civilians do listen to that specific one, but generally are pretty bad about it.
And that one's civilian wide. You can't be like just the civilians who are.
Yeah, you can't send an Amber Alert to like the werebeasts. That's like, hey, I heard there's like some like big piles of top sirloin in this one room. You gotta go get it. We got a real
tons and tons of bamboo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about how how this situation that you're managing unfolds. It seems like we all got a bit of a pest problem we are working on this week. Patrick, I see that you've been playing a bit of High on Life. So are you?
I have. Am I high on life?
Yeah.
I played about 90 minutes of High on Life, which is the new first-person shooter from what is that? Squanch Games, I think is the studio, which is founded by Justin. Working through something.
It is a hard word to not say.
Squanch.
Do we want to all get it out of our systems real quick?
Yeah. Squanch.
Squanch. Nice. Wait, let me take a second pass at that one. Squanch.
The fancier Squanch.
More nasal.
They've done a lot of VR games. It was co-founded by Justin Roiland, one of the co-creators of Rick and Morty. A show I quite liked for like the first 2 seasons, and then I think it was around the great the sauce incident. That turned me on the Community, and thus I just never quite got back around.
Yeah,
I've heard the show is fine. It's if you like the show, it's still pretty good. I just sort of fell off it because I found the Community so insufferable. But I really, truly loved those first couple of seasons of that show. And so, as much as I have soured on Justin Roiland's inability to do a voice that is not just the Morty voice over and over again, I have to admit there's something about that humor that I frequently do find interesting. But Rick and Morty is a Dan Harmon, Justin Roiland production. I also quite liked Community, and that was a Dan Harmon production. And so this is my first time sitting down and playing something sort of explicitly built around Justin Roiland's slice of the Rick and Morty experience. I think a lot of people their understanding of this game prior to launch has been it's very colorful. It was a Stadia game that got canceled as Stadia went under, and also everyone talks a lot. I think they have said that there's a chance that they might have the most amount of dialogue in a video game. I don't know if they were being facetious or not, but it's sort of irrelevant. It feels that way. The High on Life is
So we're talking full verbosity on the Bubsy scale here.
Yeah, it's certainly in concert with Forspoken, a game that also is extremely talky. We can get to unpack this a little bit more in a bit, but both games have literal options in the audio settings to change the frequency of chatter, not just amongst enemies, but amongst if you're in theory main characters that are with you. High on Life, the premise is you are a character, you can kind of pick gender, appearance, so it's sort of irrelevant because really the main character is this gun. But basically aliens land at your house. You and your sister were getting ready for your parents to be gone. Your sister immediately takes out the cocaine, ready to have a rip-roaring high school party when aliens land outdoors, and then you are thrust into trying to save humanity because the aliens that landed are not here to take over Earth, but are just to grind everyone into a paste that they could turn into drugs. They just want to get high off of humanity. So you are off to find some sort of solution to this issue in the grand world of space. The thing that I found interesting, despite the reviews of this game being pretty mixed, I didn't sit down to play it until after critics had sort of spent their time with it, was it's very rare that you get games that explicitly want to be funny. It's very rare that you get games that present themselves as, we are trying to make you laugh. We want to be comedic. Frequently, humor is laced within game writing, or is, like in the case of a Return to Monkey Island or adventure games from the Schaefer and Gilbert tree, they're funny, but they're also good puzzle games, interesting stories. High on Life is very much, it's a million quips a minute. We're trying to, and it's almost as though that's the promise is, look, if this joke doesn't land for you, don't worry. There's another one around the corner. And maybe that one will hit. And the frequency, it's interesting because I've only played 90 minutes. And so the game is itself talky and overwhelming in the way that all games are, or many games are. So it hasn't quite graded to the point that I could easily imagine it being hours from now, given that it's supposed to be like, some 10 to 12 hour adventure. Like the fact that my gun is talking to me every 20 seconds, most games these days are talking to me, whether it's through tutorial text or a character explaining the context of the world or the mechanics of the world. And so that itself, if the voice doesn't work for you, okay, fine. If the humor is off-putting, okay, fine. I will say, the humor's not grating on me yet, and it's almost actually been a race to be like, oh, you got me. Like when we were watching the game, what was the other thing we were watching? It was like, oh, that joke. Oh, is it the joke got us? And we were like, we should make a count of when it actually made us laugh. I can't remember what the context of that was recently. Maybe it was the Game Awards, but there's a moment in this game where
Animal? Was it the Muppets being funny?
Might have been. It might. I can't. I don't think that.
I don't think
it doesn't matter.
So
but
surprised the animal's funny, but yeah.
Yeah,
We're surprised that anything at the Game Awards was funny, even if it was a Muppet.
But kind of situation where you're being hit with so many things a minute that you're keeping count more of when you do laugh than when you don't.
Right.
And there's a moment in this game where you're heading down from sort of the main top side to what they call the slums, and you're going through, and as you're exiting through this tunnel to head to this sort of grimy area of the world, a kid comes in front of you, and he's like, I'm just gonna call you Meats. You're Meats to me now, and he's like, I'm just a kid. You can't get by me. You just try and walk around him, can't get around him. Try and jump over him, can't jump over him. He's like, I'm annoying, and you fucking hate me. What are you gonna do about that? And you don't seem to have any verbs. I'm looking around, so a tunnel I'm gonna go through. Is there there are kind of dialogue options, nothing's coming up. And so I try to fucking shoot him. He's like a 5-year-old kid, but I pull the trigger on the gun,
Wow.
and the gun that you're holding that talks whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing, buddy? We don't shoot kids in video games. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess there's gonna be some other bit, and this is a funny commentary on that. Okay, I get it. No other option. So I pull that trigger again, and the gun warns me. It's okay, really, this is not, you don't do this here. And then you watch the reticle change from green to red, thus indicating that you can fire. I shot that kid in the leg. And then you go around the corner, and there's a woman, and she's like, oh no, I heard some gunfire. What happened? You're like, well, we killed this kid. She's like, oh, that was my son. Oh, thank God. That kid is a real piece of shit. There's strong, taking the kid with bad vibes and turning it into a bit. And it actually kind of worked. It was actually pretty funny. And the question is really going to be going forward, given the rapid pace of those quips, how often am I getting a moment like that feels sort of subversive or transgressive and funny? Based on the hit rate so far, I'm worried that is going to be too far between to make the game tolerable over the span of 10 hours. Sure, yes, could I turn down the frequency of chatter? I guess, but this is also a shooter, and it's not a very good one. It's fine. It's not the worst shooter I've played, but that's not what you're here for. You are here for the interactions, the dialogue, the setups and payoffs. And so the notion of, well, I just like to get less of that, and I'd like to focus on the really squishy feeling shooting in this game is not what I'm here to try out. So I'm curious to play a little bit more of it. Again, the shooting's not the worst thing I've ever played, and the comedy is not the worst I've ever experienced. But it's interesting to play a game that is so forwarding that part of it. And as I haven't seen this part as much, but the way it's been described in reviews is that it's a game that is really self-aware that it's a video game and commenting on all that time, and is constantly going, God, what a shitty video game I am. But it's okay, but if you just are a shitty video game, you don't get a pass for saying so. And I'm just not sure yet where it's going to end up straddling that line. And so I'm curious to check out a little bit more just to see what that hit rate is. But my expectation is that about 4 or 5 hours in, maybe it becomes unbearable.
Hey, speaking of unbearable, and actually before we go to the interview, Patrick, did you want to hint at anything else, or are you okay saving it?
I'm okay. I would just point people towards that I finished Cyberpunk 2077. A game I also don't think I liked very very much. I'm glad I played it. It was interesting. I'm curious about the expansion that they've got coming up sometime next year. But yes, if you want to if you wanted to watch my playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077, we wrapped that up this week. We did not really the game presented this option that I would get to be a real girl boss. I get to be a real corpo head, and actually, really, the game just sort of funnels you down really kind of one main personality path with some endings at the end. But yeah, if you'd like to check in on that, feel free to head over to the final couple of videos are on twitch.tv/waypoint, and then everything will make its way to youtube.com/waypointvice sometime in the near future.
So I've been, I was looking for this. This was my last trip to New York. I was like, I need a little game on the go, something that'll be fun to play on the Steam Deck. And I love tactics, so I figured, what a perfect time to play Triangle Strategy.
Oh, we're doing this now, aren't we? Okay, good. I gotta know.
The other day I mentioned, I posted a tweet. I was like, so the most powerful characters in this game, these two little fucking annoying kids who just show up randomly and are optional characters who join your party. There was some debate over whether they're that powerful, but their set of special moves it seems pretty powerful, but that's neither here nor there. I played this game. I was sort of shocked to realize I've been playing for 12 hours. And I don't know that I feel like it's gotten good.
The scales aren't tipping in the right direction for you.
No, when I mentioned this, I was sort of taken aback by how many people showed up to comment on that tweet to just be like, that game sucks. You need to quit right now. This is because it reviewed okay. Like, this is a game that didn't get like amazing reviews, but it got a lot of positive ones. A lot of people liked that game. And I am suddenly sort of on the horns of a dilemma, because I still feel like I'm in that mode of like, but it could get good. But I have to admit, I put in 12 hours, and I would not describe those hours as having been particularly good.
But does it? So I played 4 or 5 when we talked about it on the podcast, and my takeaway was, if I played more of this, I don't think it's going to get any better than what it is. I don't know that it's going to get worse. And it was a perfectly satisfying, very mid strategy game that if all you're looking for is just to scratch a little itch in the way that you would do a round in a roguelike deck builder or something, or a Marvel Snap couple matches, that you could do worse.
Actually, you just put something together. The Marvel thing in Association Fire. It's actually not Marvel Snap that's the point of comparison. It's Midnight Suns that's the point of comparison. Because, yes, I too was like, yeah, a little battle here and there, good little like thing to play, fun, little tactics. Except there's so much story. Like,
there is.
One battle happens, and then you will have 2 play sessions where no more battles take place. It's just 2 sessions of checking in on different characters.
And talk to those scales of conviction. You gotta make choices.
And that's their whole little gimmick, and I don't know that it's particularly interesting. you do a vote where, like, I don't know that I'm bought in on that being like what a cool way to express the sentiments of the party. I don't know that I'm feeling that. But I think the big one is just, it's such a generic fantasy world. Yeah. And all the characters feel super like they don't rise beyond the level of like stock characters and archetypes. And then they never shut up. And this is the thing. It's like the ratios, it's like an identical mix to Midnight Suns in terms of like playing the tactic stuff versus like hanging out and shooting the shit. Midnight Suns is like, this is the point of the game. It's got like, this stuff has got to like these got to be bangers. Like, hanging out with these people has to be fun. It's got to be cozy. It's got to be like charming. And I think that game succeeds broadly because of that. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to be playing that many battles, but the battles are fun. And then the stuff that isn't the battles is also fun. Here, I'm like, the battles are okay. And then tons of just like people yammering at each other. And the weird thing is, we're deep in the middle of the plot, and it still has the feeling of a game that has not properly begun. And that's the other weird thing too, is like, and I think it's because the characters are such ciphers that I'm like, I don't like. A big early dilemma is like, basically, do you turn your best friend over to an invading army? Because he's the prince. They kill his dad. They take his sister hostage, so he's the sole remaining heir. Do you turn him over to the people that just like invaded and conquered the realm? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like I don't know. This seems at least unconventional. But it just didn't have any like resonance. Like, this is your character's best friend in the world. And he's like, I don't know, guys, I don't think anyone should die for me. So I think you should just turn me over to the
well, that seems to solve some problems for us, bro.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, yeah, it's done. So yeah, it's a bizarre game. And
well, I think that's been sort of the way I've responded to actually like a fair number of like recent Square Enix tactics games. Like when what was the
DioField?
Yeah, like that DioField. It's in fact, actually, like I gotta admit, you saying triangle strategy, I confused that with DioField until this very moment when you said the other one. I've been thinking you've been playing DioField and you've been playing triangle strategy, but you know what? That's part of the issue, is these generic fantasy templates that Square has set up for these games that I find myself just very hard getting into the worlds of, even if the tactics layer like looks like it could be pretty all right.
The infuriating thing is that like I just started playing Final Fantasy Tactics recently. They know how to do this. They know how to do. Some would say they are the experts in doing this.
Those games are old though. That is 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Like that's the tactics.
They knew how to do this, but maybe they don't know more.
That's fair.
I mean, the Tactics Ogre team, like that game just got remastered, and that's the team that went on to essentially, like, Tactics Ogre is the game before Final Fantasy Tactics, which refines that formula to a real sharp edge. But yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. So I'm like, the problem is this is now taking on a momentum of its own. It's like I'm playing it in bed. Just like blah blah blah. I don't know. Should I can't even remember their fucking names. I can't like.
Yeah,
you got
Wolfheart,
Gustadolphus,
and
Sarah Noah and
that's
Frederica. I remember those kids. Also, like Frederica, like things escalate fast there, where it's like, she's a stranger from a strange land and she's your betrothed. And she's like, I am so ride or die for this new country I've come to and I don't know any of the people here. But like, how can you do this? And
USA.
I'm like, whoa,
USA.
Hold on. Yeah, it's very much like took the citizenship like test and immediately turned into like a reactionary. But yeah, I'm just like I'm sort of drifting through it. I think the fact it's working as a sleep aid is probably not a great sign for the game either. I think one reason it's become a really good like bedtime game is I get through like 2 short cutscenes and I'm like, oh, I could just roll over now and go to sleep. That sounds really good. This battle will keep. This can keep to tomorrow. So yeah. Anyway, that's where things are at. People can weigh in if I should keep. I'm open to it gets good after 30 hours. I'm open to that. Just let me know. Just let me know.
Just lie to him. He doesn't even care if it's true. He just wants to be told that it might.
There's still a chance.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and then we are going to be back with Robert Ashley of A Life Well Wasted, and then we'll be back for a dip into the question bucket, so stick around. And we are back, joined by the writer and producer of the video game podcast A Life Well Wasted, which is back after a long hiatus. Robert Ashley, welcome to Waypoint Radio.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad. It's exciting times because I've been I'll be honest. I did let my subscription lapse about 3 devices ago to a life well wasted. I hadn't
think it's
quite,
still on mine. I can check Overcast to see if it made the transition over.
But yeah, like a lot has happened. Times have changed. So I'm curious.
But one thing hasn't changed, and that's me.
That's not true.
I don't know
I've seen
about
your
that.
Instagram. You spend most of your time cooking food and taking care of children now. I'd say a lot has changed.
That's true. But I'm just the same old dickhead. I and the show is like the same old show, and I'm just trying to keep it as like, unaffected by time as possible. But yes, it has been a very long time, and that freaks me out. Honestly, I've definitely, like, finishing the show this week has given me some like intimations of mortality that I haven't faced in a while, where I'm like, whoa, wow, I feel old.
Weirdly enough, that was a theme of the original run of the show as well. People sort of confronting different stages of life, career, death of industries, etc. But for people, I think most of our listeners will know what a life well wasted is. But for people who aren't familiar with it, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the show was and what it is now? The way I would have sort of described it in shorthand years ago was it's a bit like the video games Radiolab or This American Life. And I'm curious if that stands up today, if that's a fair characterization.
Yeah, I mean, that totally is. It used to bother me because I wanted to feel like I was doing something different. But yeah, it totally is. Just in the vein of specifically This American Life, the sort of Studs Terkel school of human interest stories, the idea that you can go out and find someone who maybe isn't famous for any particular reason, but they might have a worthwhile story to tell. And, you just focus on that. And the games part of it was really just a way of focusing it. And also just because coming out of the games industry stuff when I was younger, writing for magazines and being on some podcasts, there was an audience for that already. And so I just sort of slotted right into that. And yeah, the show's exactly the same. I mean, I'm using I guess the other thing I would say, you talked about like Radiolab. The other thing that makes it different, it makes it its own thing, is that I have original music for the show, and a lot of times the show kind of like breaks into song or into some kind of musical thing. I would say it has a particular kind of energy because you never know when that's gonna happen. And so yeah, there's like a musical element to it. But yeah, it's the same format. And I go back and I use a lot of the music that I used for previous episodes because I'm really trying to keep the feeling of it. I'm on episode 9, which is, what episode are you guys on? Like, is this episode 500?
We try not to think, but you're not far off. I think actually like 530, 531, something like that.
Yeah. So, when you've only done 9, consistency feels like important to sort of maintain the style. I mean, this show is so old that when I started it, I called it an internet radio show. And I've kept that because when I started it, I like, when you say podcast, it was this kind of thing, like, people talking in a room before Zoom or whatever, people just like hanging out and talking about stuff. And I was trying to differentiate it to be more like, no, this is like a show you'd hear on the radio. And now there's obviously like all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah,
it occurs to me there was a point, it was sort of a seller's market for produced high quality programs like this. Like you could have probably taken Vice to the cleaners with this just a few short years ago, or gotten Spotify to just fork over I don't know, potentially millions.
Yeah, and I could have put it all in crypto and been laying on a beach in the Bahamas somewhere with a gun in my hand. But yeah, no, I know it's true. There were times where like people offered to fund it or whatever, and I don't know why I hung on to it the way. I guess the short answer is that I could, because my wife had been in grad school all during my video game times and when the show started, and so like once it launched and she was working, I had some like breathing room financially where I didn't have to like try to turn it into a good paying job or something. I could just be like, you know, maybe this is just a cool project. And I've kept the spirit of that. I guess the other thing that's weird about it is there's never been any commercials in the show. I've never had anybody on the show to talk about like a game that's coming out or anything. There's nothing that dates it at all, which I like. You can always, I still get emails and tweets from people all the time who are like, wow, I just discovered this show and I can't believe it's over, you know? But people like find it all the time, and it stays kind of like, you know, accessible as time moves on. And I like that part of it. And the way that I have made money on the show through the years is just that I have this poster artist, Ollie Moss, who works at Valve now. But when we started on this, he was like just making like, you know, poster art that was taken off on the internet. And so he designs a poster for each episode and I sell it. And that's just like where I recoup some money for the time spent. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really regret not like cashing in on it, because I mean, what's left of the independent internet? I feel like this show is an artifact of a time when there was lots of independent media and people trying to make stuff on their own, and I loved that era, and I'm just like greedily hanging on to it, hoping that maybe it'll pop back up someday.
It's been a while since you and I have hung out properly, but in the times we have chatted over the years, one of which included a moment in which I was exploring some sort of similar type of show, though less musically inclined, and I'd asked for some advice. And I remember, and this has got to be 7 years ago, something like that. And I remember you at the time told me like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do more episodes. Like, so, you know, good luck on your thing. Here's a couple pieces of advice, but you know, I definitely have not given up on A Life Well Wasted. And then however many years passed that this has become, you know, you sort of finally realized, you know, working on, I guess, is the new one episode 9 or is the new one episode 10?
It's 8. It's 8.
Okay. Oh, okay. I got you.
I know. Yeah.
But I don't know, like, what has motivated you to not give up on this project? Like, why has this stuck? You know, from the outside looking in, sort of seems like you became a dad, got a couple of kids, you like doing your cooking videos. Sort of seemed like you'd sort of transitioned into a different phase of life and were very comfortable and happy in it. Why did this particular project that's a little more forward facing, kind of gets you out there again, why couldn't you give it up? Like, why did you have to return to A Life Well Wasted?
I mean, I'm definitely the kind of person who I hate to leave things unfinished. Like in gamer talk, like I got to beat the game. Once I start a game, it's annoying. I'm like, oh, I got to finish this shit. And then sometimes I hate myself for it. Like I'll spend 100 hours playing something because I just have to finish it. I hated leaving this thing unfinished, especially because some of the stories were, I thought what I was working on was maybe like the best episode. And so I wanted to like realize that. And part of what had kept it from even being finished in the first place was that every episode of this thing, I sort of cranked up the pressure on myself to like do something more, to like do it better. I would listen to the old ones and be like, this is embarrassing. I really can't listen to this. And so I'd always be like, I gotta like do better. And you know, that's the kind of motivation that will shut you down to some degree. When you face that, you're like, oh, I can't do it. I can't face this. And so it took me a while. Well, there's an Amber Alert, guys. Oh no. Jeez, I have it on Do Not Disturb, but
I suppose that's the one thing that should be allowed to.
Oh my God! Patrick Klepek has gone missing. You're forever a boy to me. Like that's my memory of Patrick. Anyway,
don't worry. Like that's even now. Most recently, this past weekend, I not to completely sidetrack us, but yeah. I was out with some neighbors. They have 2 kids. We're a group of families that hang out together. And we were getting ready to go, but the kids were playing in this little arcade attached to the restaurant. I was like, hey, well, let's get one more beer, and then everyone will get on the road and we'll all go home. And I went up, and the bartender looks at me and goes, well, how old could you be? And I'm like, excuse me?
How old could you be, little boy?
How old do you think I am? And he goes, 17? I was like, oh, come on. Like, he's like, give me your ID. And then at that time, a woman that was runs the establishment like came over and like wrapped him on the hand and goes, that he's got 2 little girls and he's here with a family. Like, just give him his beers. And you go, oh shit, that's my mom. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, just take the beers. They're yours. You don't even pay for them. It's like, and so I went back to.
I mean, what's funny to me about that is you were always like the boy, even when you were the boy. You know what I mean? When you were like the kid in the room, but you
I
just
can't leave him behind.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I've tried to go facial hair.
Complain.
It's not very complimentary, and so I'm just stuck. Maybe as I approach 40, that maybe I can get to the other side.
No, hang
It's
on.
just
When you
you
grew a
and
beard,
Leonardo DiCaprio.
when you grew a beard, it totally worked. You looked like a painting of like a satyr who was going to lead a maiden.
Yeah. Look, my wife would have made me shave it sooner but I couldn't like close the gap, and it never filled in properly. I never got to have. I look at you, Rob. When I think of a beard, I think of that. I just had
clothes though.
Oh, this Rob.
Well, I know, but you've got a Santa thing going at the bottom. Like, you got options. Like, none of that ever happened to me. I never felt.
Rob's
never
beard,
felt like
Rob's beard is like a serious turtleneck, like all the way. You know what I mean? Like, it is fully, like you would slaughter this man and take his fur for warmth. You know.
Whereas I frequently felt like I never made it past the Amber Alert phase of wearing. Like, I felt like I looked at myself and went, I wouldn't trust me
Sketchy
wearing
mustache.
this. So I other than Dan Reichert's bet against me getting that mostly shaved, I ended up cleaning it all up before my first kid was born because I was like, I don't want that in the pictures. So that's how it.
So I do want to go back though to something you were saying there, Robert, just about sort of because I'm curious. Like, from the outside, it sort of felt like the show was like all the episodes were great and everything. It just sort of felt like it was a cool project that had maybe reached a stopping point with life stuff happening. But what you just sort of laid out, it sounds like you were you were on a roll and you were in the middle of producing something that you were feeling good about, but also your expectations and your sense of expectations around A Life Well Wasted were sort of ratcheting up consistently in the background. Did A Life Well Wasted just kind of like, was it sort of like left in situ at like the production desk? Is it a workshop project that you walked away from and like for years it's been sort of like sitting there waiting for you to come finish?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a small story at the beginning of this episode that I did the interviews for in 2021, but otherwise, the big story in it is interviews I did at the Game Developers Conference in 2012. I want to say
with no follow up, like as though they are in amber from 2012.
Well, part of it was that. Well, yeah, no, I don't actually go back to follow up. I stick with the original reporting, but the reporting went on for a while afterwards because it's like this elaborate story. And part of the reason that I got caught up was that I talked to like 8 people in the story, and it was just dealing with the complexity of that in the story itself, and struggling also with like how much I really had to nail, the story down. I don't know how to talk about it without talking about the specifics of the story. I don't want to ruin it, but anyway, it was just like it was complicated, and also I just had like a big crisis of self-confidence. I'm not like the most confident person, and even though this show among video gamers had the reputation of being like super professional or like well produced or whatever, I had worked a little bit with like Roman Mars, who's the 99% Invisible guy. He was living in Oakland like toward the end of when I was living in California, and gotten a taste of like what the professional people were doing, and was like, oh, that's not what I do at all. Because I just like made it all up, and I didn't have like the artistic integrity to like stand by that and be like, oh, I do my own thing. That's cool. It took me a long time to come around to that. Like, okay, well, what? Maybe I'm an amateur and I like figured out my own way to do stuff. And that's good because there's a lot of like samey sounding radio production now, you know.
Well, I was going to
So
say that it's so funny that it's like looped all the way around, where so many podcasts were inspired by that generation of like produced reported podcasts, that now it's almost a cliche, right? Where you like, you know, it's a new investigative podcast from a different publishing, you know, company or whatever. And you turn it on and you know how it sounds like, you know what the cuts are going to sound like, you know what the narration sounds like.
It's a formula.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's so strange that like, because I think, you know, now I think in some ways A Life Well Wasted maybe even has risen in stature in some ways, because at the time and certainly in the intervening years, it stands further apart from the type of podcast, pure podcast that was originally, you know, sort of set against.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that stuff didn't even exist when I was originally doing it. It kind of cropped up when the money came into podcasting. I mean, when I started the show, I just remember part of the reason that I even tried it in the first place was there was this guy named Benjamin Walker who started a podcast called The Theory of Everything. And it's not like a This American Lifestyle podcast. He's much more inspired by Joe Frank, who's another great like old school radio storyteller guy. But I started listening to that show and I was like, oh, you could do this as a podcast. And like I made music. I had a music studio in my apartment where me and my songwriting partner were making an album. And so I had all this stuff and I was like, I've got microphones, I've got a record, you know, I've got a computer to record on, I can edit audio. And so, you know, there was just nothing to, you know, compete with in the iTunes app, you know, whatever it is, iTunes podcast section at the time. I almost said app, but there wasn't even an app. It was just like iTunes was a desktop thing and you could put it on your iPod, you know. But yeah, I think that it took me a while to just come back around to it. And part of that is that I have this friend, Grant Stewart, who I met in Athens, Georgia when I was living there, he lives in New York and he works in the kind of like professional podcast business. He edits a lot of stuff, and he just over the years kind of like dragged me back into it by involving me in the things he did. Like he started his own show last year. I think it released earlier this year, called The Milky Way Underground, and it's a fiction show, like a scripted drama that was funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It was aimed at kind of tweens. It's like a weird, like Twin Peaks for tweens on the radio. And he just like pulled me into that and had me do some editing for it. And I did a voice. I was like the dad on the show.
It's amazing.
And he really just like pushed me back into it, and it got my confidence up to working on it. I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. Because up until that point, I would open the files and start playing around with it and being like, oh my God, I can't face this. So yeah, it's been a long process.
Is that purely just the sort of crisis of confidence, or in some ways is that you have so many other things in your life, like your kids, that these are easy distractions? Like there are a million things I could be doing related to all of this. The notion that I'm also going to set aside time when I have any free moment to invest in picking up the pieces on this. I mean, I've talked about this on our podcast before. Like, I always wanted to write a book, and it's like, do I want to give up, you know, my evenings and weekends to do that? And like right now, no. But then I see my peers and colleagues doing stuff like that, even when they do or don't have kids, and I feel that draw, and I just haven't been able to kind of like pick up the pieces there to open up that document or make that pitch. Is part of that where just life circumstances make it easier to go to ignore that project file?
Absolutely. And it's also that when you're looking at a project like a book or like this show, you know, where you know you're going to need to put hundreds of hours of effort into something, it's easy to think like, I don't really have the time for that, especially because when I was young, when I would do this kind of stuff, I would just like stay up all night. I would just go on like a work bender for days. And I can't work like that with my kids. My wife works full-time job, and so I'm like the primary caregiver for the kids. My time to work is like a couple hours here and there. It took me a while to realize that I could use that time. It takes for fucking ever. But you can push the boulder up the hill at 2 hours a day and actually like move the needle. And so I mean, that's just what you got to do when you're in that parenting situation and you feel the need to work, which I do. I mean, I feel like so bored by not making anything. I love to put something out into the world, you know, whether it's music or writing or podcasts or whatever. I don't want to stop that. I enjoy that. And you just got to like fit it in, but it's a good excuse when you have kids around to not get it done for sure.
There's always something else you could be doing as opposed to investing that time in yourself.
Yeah.
You mentioned picking up the pieces on stories from basically a decade ago. I've always been interested in the fact that the stories in A Life Well Wasted, you sort of aim for timelessness, which is the opposite of my job description, which is what is the thing that people are talking about? What's a good angle on it today? And those are different modes of storytelling to try and get people interested. But you also come from a background of having written for magazines and websites in which like different scales of timeliness are involved of kind of how you're finding the angles. How do you look for a story for A Life Well Wasted? Like, is it just, what is your process, or is it just you just wait for things to come to you? I'm just curious how you actually, like, when you open the computer, like, I need to find something to report about. Where do you pull on a thread?
Well, I do have a file that has, you know, if I run into something while I'm on Twitter generally or the internet in some way where I'm like, oh, that could be cool, it ends up in this file of mine, and sometimes that yields a story. I mean, that's how I ended up with the introductory story in this episode. I was just like web surfing and found a subject that I thought would work, but often it just sort of lands in my lap, and I've discovered as I've gotten older and I've gotten to know myself that this is just the way my brain works. I am like very receptive to chance, and if I chance upon something, I'll just like go for it all the way. And so, you know, the main story in this new episode, I reported starting back in 2012 at GDC, like I said, and it was just that I was introduced to this guy, Brian Gibson, who is the bass player for this band called Lightning Bolt, who are like a crazy noise band. And he was there because he worked at his day job working for Harmonix, working on the Rock Band games, and he had over the years been developing his own like game that he wanted to put out, which was a rhythm game that was eventually came out before the fucking podcast called Thumper.
Oh, Thumper! That is, oh my god, an all-time great.
Yeah,
have you played that in VR before?
Oh no, I haven't. I mean,
Robert, like I cannot. Whatever
I'd have to
your
have a
feelings
medical
are,
professional on hand to deal with my heart attack. Like,
but like whatever your feelings are on virtual reality, like as a medium or concept or whatever, like that is one of the. It is sensory overload, but in a way that is like,
wow.
I like think back upon those moments playing Thumper in VR and get goosebumps.
That's awesome.
That game specifically like gets in. I never wanted to put on that suit that the Rez suit that like has like the million different vibrators on you. But because I don't really care for Rez as a game, but if I could do that for Thumper, I mean, yes, I think I might die. But I think it might be worth it. Like I think the experience would be okay, and I would ascend, and I'd be thankful for the ride along the way.
It's a really visionary game. I think it's pretty amazing that he came out of like the Harmonix pipeline with something so. I don't know, that game just really like hits you in the stomach. I think that it's a reaction to those Harmonix games, you know, like I think he looked at that stuff and was like, that's fucking lame. You know, because he's a musician and he was just like, this is like his day job. But anyway, like I just ran into this guy. I was introduced by a friend and we were hanging out and he just started like telling me this story and I was like, oh, this is perfect. And so, yeah, I don't know. A lot of it is just chance. I definitely am like looking for new material now because now that I got this thing going, I just, I want to keep it up. I don't maintain any kind of like, delusions that I'm going to start putting one of these out every month, which when I was younger, I used to really think I was going to do. And now I'm like, no, but I mean, it would be nice to get one, every year. That'd be great. Especially because Ollie, the poster art guy, like he's so freaking busy. Like it was really just to like get him to, you know, talk to me on email. I had to find somebody who worked at Valve to go and like tap on his shoulder
Hey,
at
Jake
work.
Rodkin, could you go find Ollie somewhere in the office?
Yeah, I was like, he does not respond to me in any way. Could you just see if he hates me or if he just like hasn't seen anything that I've, you know, sent him? And he's just really busy. So I like our like series thing going. So we'll probably keep it really mellow. And in the meantime, that guy Grant Stewart I was talking about, we're working on like, you know, a commercial podcast that we're pitching that I think is going to happen. That's not about video games explicitly, but we'll have a lot of like the a life well wasted vibe, I think. But yeah, so that, I mean, that's my future plan for it, and I'm just going to be like open to the chance of finding another great story. The thing about the timelessness aspect of stories is it is so less limiting than news. You know what I mean? Like news, there's only, you know, there's such a short window for anyone caring about anything, and honestly, like you open up Twitter and it's just such a flood. Whereas if you think only about like what's a good story that doesn't matter when you hear it. If you know, if you heard this 10 years from now, you'd still think it was kind of interesting. There's just so much more out there, and you can take such a casual approach to reporting it. It's not this like, I've got to talk to this guy, I've got to post this by the end of the day. It's, you know, it's very, it's much more relaxed, which appeals to me.
Do you think that change in the ecosystem is partly like, you know, your background was freelance writing for a bunch of different publications, and you were great features writer. And, you know, I do know like the economics changed, certainly, you know, around 10, 15 years ago. I mean, the economics are always changing. They seem to be always getting worse. But, you know, so there is the obvious factor of rates were better compared to like just the dollar amounts people were paid today. And the money was
I was going to say,
more.
you probably wrote in the era in which you got paid per word, at least for a little bit.
Oh yeah, no, I got paid per word. Yeah, on the freelancing stuff. I mean, what was it? It was like 2007, 2008 before EGM and all that stuff closed. You do a cover feature for one of those magazines and get paid like $2,000, you know, and that was real money back then. Not that $2,000 isn't real money now, you know.
But it was real,
especially at the yeah. That was the most. I was writing for. I did occasional features for like Jeff Green and Darren Gladstone for, I guess at that point they were GFW, right? I guess it would have been Games for Windows at that point when I was in college, like 2006, 2007. And that's the most, it was like whenever I was able to get one of those pitches through, because it was one of the last of the paid per word. It's like 600 words? Really? Like, okay.
And it was a shock to go, you know, I was just doing freelance because I was like spending half my time making music. And I would just come in and out of the office, and it was a very chill, casual kind of relationship with work that I had going. And then the magazines died and they focused on the website, and it was suddenly like, do you want to do like twice as much work and have like way worse deadlines and make like a quarter of the money? And I was just like, no, thanks. And that was basically, but it came with another realization of mine, which was that, you know, Rob says I was a great feature writer. I disagree. I love to write, but I was always frustrated with it. I never got to where I wanted to go with it. And we were doing all those podcasts at the time, like GFW radio and everything, and they were getting so much more audience interest. Like I would never hear back from anybody. I would spend like all this time on a story, and if I heard back from somebody, it would be on a message board who was like, you probably got paid to do this, you know, like it would just be, you know, that would be the feedback. Whereas like the podcast stuff, there was just so much of an audience for it. And at that time I was like, who even wants to listen to this? Like, why, you know, it's just like, oh, we're all just talking like we would normally talk, bullshitting around the office or whatever. It took like no work and had way more interest around it. And so I was already doing audio work for my band, and I just realized like, take a hint, you know, do the thing that, you know, comes a little easier and maybe get like more, you know, audience interest. And that was really what sent me on the podcasting thing.
I've always been curious, like, did you have a life well wasted rattling around? Like, was it, because the first episode is right after One Up got shut down, and a bunch of that episode is you running around a rooftop talking to different people who are part of One Up, and it's a really interesting episode. It's sort of unique among the Life Well Wasted run, because so much of it is, it's kind of the one breaking news thing that happens in that series, but it's retrospective at the end of One Up and EGM and that whole like era in Ziff. Had you already? I'm curious to what degree had you already sort of sketched out, I want to do a podcast like a Life Well Wasted, and to what degree was that event a catalyst for you just like launching into this project?
I definitely was like trying to get into radio work. There was a time like a month or two before EGM died, and I did this first podcast where I had tried to pitch a radio story to a radio show called Studio 360, which is one of those, I think it's a PRI show. It's still on. I think they record in Chicago. It's been around for 20 years. It's one of these just sort of like magazine shows. They do lots of different stories, sometimes about artists, sometimes about newsworthy things. And what had happened was there was that Nintendo DS game called Electroplankton. Do you guys remember this game? It was like a music toy. What is it? Toshio? I can't remember the creator's name, but he was famously like makes musical instruments and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And he made this kind of like fun, interactive music toy game for DS. And I was like, this seems like, because it's a sound-based game, something that maybe I could do a story, a kind of review for on a radio show. And it was, in the era before NPR started having like video game reviews occasionally on All Things Considered or things like that. It was not really like a thing. And so I actually made this 5-minute story about Electroplankton. It was my first like attempt at making any kind of radio. And I sent it to this show, and they're like, this isn't really our thing. But because I had done that, I felt like I was playing around and getting that format like that I had heard when I was younger. I was a big fan of This American Life and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, this is how they do it. There's just some like music right here when you take a pause or whatever, and started playing with it. And so when the magazine died, I had been thinking of like, I'm going to do some kind of radio show. And I already had a field recorder that I had bought for it. I bought like a Zoom H2, which I still use. And I was walking, we were at a party in the Mission, and it was all the people who had just been fired drinking, and there was a rooftop, and I did all the interviews with the stereo mic on top of the Zoom, which are like two small diaphragm condensers, and they pick up everything. So it's just like all the street noises of the Mission, just all this insane. I remember, I think it was the third episode, someone on Twitter, a listener, was like, hey, I love your show. You really need a shotgun mic. I'm going to send you one. And they sent me a shotgun mic. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, this is how you do it. Occasionally, listeners to the show would always like kind of reach out and help me out with things like that. I mean, that's how the poster thing started. Like, Ollie just reached out to me because he was listening to it and was like, can I make posters for the show? And I was like, I hadn't thought about making money on this. That's a great idea.
Well, that's the era when he was doing all those, like really got his name under those Star Wars posters that I remember everybody.
Oh, I think that was after, actually. This was was right when he did a series of not Penguin books. What's the sort of cheap paperback orange and black editions that you can find in every bookstore. I cannot remember.
Random House?
No, I can't think of it right now. But he did a whole series of like video game versions of those things, and I think it blew up on Dig. If you remember,
yeah, that's if you want to start, marking eras of the internet back when Dig was the place you wanted your articles to get linked to,
and maybe Metafilter. I think it was
Metafilter or Slashdot. I think Slashdot was still important back then. That would show up on like when I would check whatever the charts were for One Up. It's like, oh, someone posted it on Slashdot. Yay,
badass. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't even remember what the original question was. Oh, just how I had, if I had this in mind. Yeah, I did have it in mind, and I was in a mental state of feeling like I could figure out anything, which is a good place to be. I think you should like trick yourself into believing that as much as possible. Whatever you want to do, just like really believe. You can always feel humiliated at what a failure you are later, but just going into something like, I can figure this out, you probably can, you know?
Well,
I have no music brain like that. I have no zero concept how you're able to do any of that. I can understand it on a sort of I can see your fingers moving, but how a brain creates music is just one of those things. It's part of why I love, games like Rock Band. I feel like it gives me insight into a form of creation that I just will never fully grok. But as someone, part of I think what makes A Life Well Wasted so interesting in that Radiolab sort of vein is that it feels like you're listening to a soundtrack while also listening to like an interesting story. And how do you swap between those, or do you swap between those two modes, where I'm wondering how one influences the other? Where are you editing kind of a story in a straightforward manner and then kind of a musical cue or an idea bubbles to the surface? Or are you making music and then that results in you thinking, well, actually I could reshape how I'm editing this story? I'm just wondering how the two of those sort of interact with one another as you go through sort of the production phase.
Yeah, they do interact, and you're talking about like, I don't have a music brain, I don't know how that works. I think at its core, like, music is an act of listening. Even if you don't know music, if you don't know how to play the scales on a piano or something, if you were to sit down and just like relax and start plucking at the piano keys, you'll run into something. If you just like randomly plug around, you'll be like, that sounds like music. And for this show, there's a lot of stuff like that where I'll be like, because my method is just a big mess. Like, I just have all of the audio clips. I'll have like 5 hours of audio all cut up into random bits, and I just start moving them around like a giant collage. And occasionally something will like suggest itself. Like in the new episode, there's a story about this guy Bubsia. He's a blindfolded speedrunner, and I wanted something that would be like an introduction to the show that would ramp up the energy, because he's kind of a soft-spoken, a little bit monotonous guy. I mean, it's really interesting what he does, but I needed some more energy. And so I searched YouTube for his speedruns and found one of those like Twitch streams where they're hosted by a host, like there's a guy who comes on there and is like, today's speed run. It's like a sport thing, and there's this moment where he's introducing him where he says something and it's so musical. It's like, today I'm going to introduce you to something the runner isn't even going to get to see at all. And I'm like, isn't even going to get to see it all. I hear this thing and I want to hear it. It's like really rhythmic and melodic. And so I just start like stacking them against each other, and it becomes a loop that I ended up like doing this whole thing with. And yeah, when I say like I stay open to just random things like becoming what I do, that's one of those things where you're just like, I don't will ideas into existence. I just see them in the murk and I pull them out and go like, oh, there's a cool thing. Like, I think that'll work. And the trouble is, when you do that, you have nothing to fall back on. You can't be like, I didn't find anything, now I'm going to just make it up. You end up being like, oh no, what if I can't do this? And you get kind of stuck. But you just have to like keep going back and listening and like finding something in it, and yeah, the music for me is an important part of it. And a lot of times, if I feel like if I start to lose faith in a story, I'll find a musical moment in it and just like fully go for it. And sometimes I'll do an entire insane musical thing and be like, wow, that really doesn't work in the story, and just ditch it. It'll be like, 10 hours of me goofing around with something like this big elaborate thing. And then I'll just be like, I have to cut that. But, it gets me interested because I'm always searching for like energy and feeling in the show. I never feel satisfied with just people talking, unless they're really saying something that's like hitting me. If there's like exposition happening, if we're just going over some important details, I need like some momentum, some feeling to carry me through and keep me interested. And so that's when I kind of turned to the music. And plus I had all of this like music sitting around, because like I said, I was in a band, and we would make all kinds of stuff that we'd never put out. I always say like the music is by I Come to Shanghai. In reality, it's like a bunch of cast off stuff that we never used. And then occasionally when we were still playing music together, I would make my bandmate come in and be like, dude, I need some music. And and he went to Berklee School of Music, and he's just like a little tune machine. I'd be like, can you do something like Western? And I just get him set up on something, and I just we would like, it was the opposite of the kind of music we would make for ourselves. He would just crank out all this stuff, and I would, use it with very little effort. Whereas when we would make music together, it'd always end up being like, let's make a double concept album that takes like 5 years to make. And, it's totally comically like self-sabotage. But so I have this huge library of cast off music that is part of it's part of the feeling of the show. I can always like, if I want to maintain a consistency between episodes, I can always reach back and grab these songs that have been in previous episodes, and instantly it's like, oh, there it is. There's A Life Well Wasted thing,
So one thing I am curious about though is just like, I'm curious about like basically the degree to which like, creative integrity or like confidence or whatever. Like I'm so curious. You're a very creative person. Like I've like a lot of your projects seem to be really well. Like seem to do really well. Like if we go back to GFW, you were people really loved your presence on that show. People really liked A Life Well Wasted. I during pandemic times, I was sort of struck by you just started making a cooking channel on YouTube, A Life Well Tasted. And here's the thing, like they were really good videos. They're really charming cooking videos. And there's a part of me, because like, so my whole career profile was like freelancer who is like, I'm just hoovering up every nickel and dime I possibly can, right? Like, will someone pay me for a thing? I will do that thing. How much do you want? I'll do more than that. I'll do more than what you want, and I'll just do it for peanuts. And so like the funny thing to me, and I admire it, but I'm also really curious about it, is you seem like someone who has a bunch of like creative ideas and projects that you could turn into a thing, but you largely haven't. And partly I'm sure it's, being a full-time dad, as it were, does, as you alluded to, like fill a lot of the hours in the day. But I am kind of curious about like, I don't want to say like lack of output or whatever, like put in that negative way, but like, I am curious, like, there were it feels like there were a lot of ideas that you could have taken and run with, over the years. And for whatever reason, you didn't pursue them as like pro or semi-pro opportunities. And I'm just curious about like, what's behind that?
Yeah. I mean, fair point. There definitely is like a lack of output. Some of it is that, the A Life Well Wasted thing was successful enough that when I was at the same time making music, I was like, oh, this was successful. Now I'm going to be successful with music. And I just took all of my time and creativity and effort, and I funneled it into that under the idea that like, surely I would also succeed in this thing, which to me at the time felt much more important. Like music was the core of my ambitions.
That was like your self-definition. You were a musician who also did like games writing.
It was what I really, really, really wanted to do, and games writing was something that I had like cared about a lot, especially because I grew up reading games magazines, and I'm a big video game nerd, and I always wanted to like write for EGM and all that. But once all of those magazines fell apart, and it was just this internet thing, and it was like amorphous and constantly changing, and the money, you know, dried up so badly, and I don't know. I was wary of the business side of things too, and so especially because like early on, I would get some emails from random people who would, you know, offer to buy the show or whatever, and it just felt very like impersonal. I don't know. Another aspect of it is probably that I don't really feel comfortable being the focus of attention, and I don't like fandom. Like, I think fandom is sort of beneath people. I think people should have some self-respect and like be on the level with the people that they enjoy their work. You know, I don't want to have interactions with people where they're like, "Oh my god, I
People
love
running up
everything
on you and yelling like "Bobito" did not do it for you.
No, and it's not that it's like I respect everyone. I just really want to be like equals, you know. And I don't like seeing my face on the internet. I don't aspire to have like a huge number of Twitter followers. I try to.
You got out at the right time, buddy, because it's all the opposite direction from then on.
Yeah, I imagine that the future was a future in which like some kind of anonymity is more valuable than exposure. But at the same time, it's just me being a, you know, total chicken. Like I couldn't. I talked myself out of like trying to go professional or whatever because I didn't want to fail at it. You know, there's that aspect of it too. And because, like I said, my wife has like a good job, and there's less economic pressure on me to produce.
You have the option to say no to any number of those things that otherwise, in a different circumstance, maybe you do say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I had been like on my own, I would have been like you were saying, like hoovering up pennies. Yeah, whatever. Like I would have been writing whatever I could write, making whatever kind of podcast, selling a life well wasted to Coca-Cola. I didn't, you know, like whatever. It's just I had the privilege to not have to do that. And same thing with music happened. You know, I Come to Shanghai, my band, the third album that we made is like this big double album. And there was this label in Nashville that wanted to put it out. And I was like, we put out our things ourselves. And so now I have like 600 double albums, like LPs in my fucking garage that I'll just carry around for the rest of my life because I'm so indie. You know, so that it's just I do that to myself. Maybe I'm getting out of it. Maybe I, you know, like I said, I'm trying to work on this new show with my friend Grant, and I take A Life Well Wasted seriously. It's not that I'm not going to keep doing that. It's just that I consider that to be like it's established. It is what it is. I'm going to keep it where it is.
Also, if it's just yours, you can have your own self-imposed or lack of self-imposed death. Like, you know what I mean? Like a commercial project that you sell is more of work, whereas A Life Well Wasted, while is, you know, the broader sense of work, but is not a obligation in the sense of, and it sounds like you would like to have an opportunity where, look, we all kind of like deadlines because it forces us to get our shit together and to make a thing and to get it out the door. But at the same time, it sounds like there's also a desire to keep this particular thing, both kind of like I Come to Shanghai, the music you make, and this podcast to be, I don't want that thing to necessarily, it's okay if it goes away for 10 more years.
Okay, maybe not 10 years, but yeah.
You know what I mean, right? Like
yeah.
I can choose that pace that it exists in and also satisfy that creative impulse to just, I mean, anyone that makes things like in the way that we have like written things, whether it's podcasts or whatever, like, there is satisfaction in hitting publish even on a flawed work that you have to finally walk away from. There is satisfaction in just it's out there, regardless of how well it does. It's just you did it. I've hit complete on this thing, and then I get to go on to the next one. So I understand the impulse to try and have your cake and eat it too. Have something that kind of
Yeah, and it's not like I am a perfectionist, but it's not like this thing isn't coming out because I've spent the last 2 years like de-essing the interview or something. I just it's really like so much of the work was just figuring out the stories themselves. And right now, like I've given myself a deadline, and now I'm like scrambling to try to get some of the polish that I would like in the episode. Like I did spend like an hour de-essing an interview yesterday.
What is de-essing an interview? I'm so
so like, have you ever had someone on your show where they use like a shitty mic, and so every time they talk and they're like, "Welcome to," like it's
okay,
like
I see.
Like
every
sibilance?
S and sometimes T's too will like distort and be, if you look at the waveform, they'll be really dense, and sometimes they'll be huge if they're really bad. And you can use plugins to do it, or if you're me and you're an insane masochist, I just automate them. Like I go into each one and I pull down the level to being a level that I prefer. And if it's really bad, I will take an individual word and I will EQ just that word. Okay.
Oh my God, Robert, what are you doing?
This is all behavior learned from music world stuff. Like that's where all of my madness came from. Cause I mean,
A blessing and a curse. You have the forbidden knowledge. You know that these are things you could fix and make sound better, and so you do.
I just happen to know that when Skype like fucks up and makes someone sound like a robot, you can change the pitch of the recording and make an EQ adjustment that makes it more legible, and so you just do that word by word wherever you need it.
Our producers in chat noting that
No, don't.
they do this on our show. It is just not something Patrick and I have to deal with. And
Oh
we are
yeah, well
blissfully
now you
unaware
know. That's how the sausage is made.
of
You
what
gotta-
we're
you-
turning in.
Yeah, it's it can be kind of fun to do stuff like that. It's another way of distracting you from doing the important work, getting like lost in the details. But the other thing about like me hanging on to it as it is the commercial market for this kind of show. All of the shows are like 20 minutes long now, and I actually considered doing that with A Life Well Wasted. At some point, I was like, this is too much. I can't do this like solo production hour long thing. I got to take it down. But I actually feel like it really loses something when you can't have like multiple stories. There's something to me about it's like a magazine. Like you get an assortment of things. I like that it goes to different places, because I don't want to have an episode where it's like, oh, that story is kind of shitty. Like that's just one of the shitty episodes. At least there should be like, if you don't like that story, then hang out for the next one, and maybe you'll like that one. I like putting them together in close proximity and having an interaction between stories. And there's just no commercial market for that. Maybe on Audible now, like they're putting out some like long form stuff that's kind of interesting, where people are doing radio style stories, but they're like 2 hours long. They're kind of like mini audiobooks, but in radio format. I could see something like that. And I do a lot of like Audible listening. Honestly, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to books, and I think there's a lot of space in the audiobook world for the kinds of things that I like to do. Like I had this fantasy of doing a podcast version of this book that came out last year called Bring That Beat Back. I'm trying to remember the author, but it's a history of sampling. And he wrote an entire book about like the birth of sampling in music, which is when you take a clip of a piece of music and you use it to make something else. It's like where hip hop and a lot of dance music came from. As I was reading the book, I was like, oh my God, this would be so good if you could actually like have the music as part of it. But it's just like a IP nightmare. Nobody will let you do it because we're stuck in this like stupid world where everyone owns everything and you can't do anything creative with it. But I would love to do that kind of work. If the right project came along, to like music up a book would be really fun.
I guess one question you mentioned earlier just about that strange tension between going back to the GFW days about you could put a lot of effort into writing a long form story, and just crickets back. And then just random shit shooting on GFW becomes like memeified, like thousands of people are like, talking about, etc.
Sean Elliott just reads a forum post, and that's more popular than anything else any of us have done over 15 years.
and that's something I'm just as we get to the end here, it's something I'm kind of curious about, just in terms of like just the creative landscape, and in some ways kind of what culture seems to be most interested in, because I think this is something a lot of us we're keenly aware of, that tension. Like just the other day, we were sort of joking about the fact that when we stream games, more people watch before, like when we are not streaming a game, like before we start actually playing the game that we're streaming. More people are into us just like hanging around shooting the shit.
Or opening a web browser.
Yeah.
And just
like,
we're just going to click on links and have discussions, as opposed to, in theory, our jobs, which is to like play this video game and be entertaining and insightful while talking over it.
And so I'm curious, like, what you make of that, because I think a lot of like the creative economy right now has oriented not just around turning things like that into products. Like, obviously it sort of all ended in scandal, and they're sort of rebuilding now. But like, for instance, Bon Appetit discovering parasociality as part of their cooking programming, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, like, do you like, is it a matter of like personal taste that this stuff is like not necessarily what you're into, or like, do you find it a little bit concerning as a creative person that like so much value is placed not on a considered creative work, but is instead more about like a relationship with a persona that people have?
Well, I mean, I think it's obvious that we live in a time of mass isolation, and like people are more isolated every day. My entire life, I feel like, has been like living through the decline of social relationships and family. Everyone I know is, their family came apart. They barely have friends to talk to. The older you get, the more isolated you are. And it's not surprising that people seek out connections in that way, because it's what people are missing more than anything. It's like, on some level, like, yeah, it sucks if you really want to like get people engaged on your take on the, hot new game this week. But at the same time, it's understandable that, more importantly, people just really want to like make a connection with a human being. The fact that, publishers and corporate interests are like getting theirs off of that is kind of funny and weird to me. But yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe the more important thing to think about from like a creative point of view, if you're a person who like writes and publishes things, is to think about like how you could serve that need while serving your own creative needs. Like, you don't have to like let people into your life to listen to you chat with Patrick while you guys set up a podcast. It doesn't have to be that. It could be, maybe there's another way to have people feel like they're really connecting with you when they engage with your work. But I think a lot of it is just pure isolation. I mean, I'm isolated. I live in Norman, Oklahoma. I've moved multiple times in the past decade. I know people here mainly because I have kids in school, but it's so weird, man. It's like being back in college where you're in a dorm and like, yeah, some guys, but they're like guys you would never, normally hang out with. But you got to have,
especially once you have kids, and it's like, how do you find that magical overlap of like kids with similar ages so that you could spend actual time building relationships and friendships with people? Like that's really difficult to find that skeleton key.
And if you move around, which a lot of people in this kind of economy, like you move because you got to get like a better job. So you move somewhere, and now you're in a place where like people here have friendships that extend back to their childhoods because they never left. But you are here brand new, and like no one's really looking to make new friends. They've got friends, and it's hard. And I think a lot of people are in that kind of like stuck out of socializing stuck out of friendships. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but I now understand when I was doing those podcasts back in the day where I said I didn't understand why people were listening to us shoot the shit. What I didn't appreciate was that I had friends. Like people, like I had friends, I had interesting people to talk to. I could come into an office in downtown San Francisco in a fancy building and ride up an elevator in a t-shirt, looking like a bum, and like come hang out with a bunch of people playing video games that came out like 2 months from now and talking to them about all this cool stuff that I like to talk about. And I just took it totally for granted. And now, I mean, I don't know anybody where I live who even plays video games, you know? So I can understand why someone would want to like tune in and hear people just kind of like chit chatting about that stuff, because it reminds you of those times when you had those connections.
Well, on the flip side of that, like the attention economy rewards, like when you were talking about what parts of you as the person who is sort of like the person being looked at, like you are rewarded for revealing more and more about yourself. You are rewarded for being more and more personal. I remember I didn't think too closely about that because there wasn't much for me to hide. And then when I had kids, I'd have a long think about, okay, this is like a really simple version of it, but anything I could post to Twitter would get less likes than me posting a picture of one of my kids being cute. I've never done that. I don't post pictures of my kids. I will tell occasional like goofy stories about them, but I am pretty close to not doing that anymore with my oldest as she approaches an age where I should respect everything about what she's up to in a way that shouldn't be public facing, given sort of like the public facing nature of what I do. But boy, you know what people would really like to hear is like cute stories about my kids and pictures of my kids. And I'm not saying that to necessarily like indict an audience necessarily. I think a lot of, I think you really hit on like the tension that exists there and why people respond to things like that. But at the same time, why I try to be really thoughtful and protective of, I understand why that would be rewarded, but also my kids didn't ask for this. My family didn't ask for, like, I didn't, frankly. I when I started this job, I didn't think this was where it was going to end up. And it comes with its own, benefits, but also with its own, you got to spend a lot of time thinking about what you're putting out there and what the rewards actually are, beyond just people thinking it's interesting.
Yeah. The kid stuff, I really struggled with that. I mean, I don't have like a huge following on Twitter, but kids are such a huge part of my life. It's occasionally felt strange to never mention it or to like post things. I have posted a couple of pictures over time of like my 3-year-old loves to play Super Mario Brothers, like the original game on that little Game & Watch thing that they put out a couple years ago.
Yeah.
It's so tiny, dude, and he's 3 years old.
This thing, right?
Yeah,
this
that thing.
Yeah.
My guy can get to like the second world on that little thing. And
the patience to do that.
Oh my
God. Not imagine my 6-year-old doing that.
And I dole it out to him at 20 minutes at a time because I'm worried he's gonna have like myopia. It's such a tiny screen, I'm like, can you play like Mario Bros on a big screen or something? This is insane. But he loves that thing, and so I've posted a picture of that. Just like some of it is like pure parental, like I want to brag on my kids, and it's so hard not to when you have like a platform for it, because everybody is like, my kids are so cool. I think that it's mostly innocent that the audience likes that, and it's hard to think of it as an audience. I almost wish there was just a way we could be more of a community, that it was less like Twitter where it's like broadcasting out. Maybe this is shaking out right now with all these Twitter alternatives like Mastodon or whatever, but I would love to be more in like an online community with people that I felt more comfortable with, and where it didn't feel like I was just thrusting my information out there for a hit of pure media virality or something, but instead just, there's even if it were like 500 people, we have standards here, and we don't, accept people who, post hateful things and harass people. And this is just like a good community of people. I would love that. I miss that about message boards sometimes, but I think
that's probably the closest equivalent. Like it just felt private, even though it was public in a
and you
way.
didn't have to worry about some weird, somebody like showing up at your door or like, threatening you or your family or saying nasty stuff about your kids or whatever. You could just kind of like trust that this is your group. I mean, obviously there were people who had to be excommunicated from like NeoGAF, but yes. Yeah. there was a purge. Yeah. I think that's what's interesting about people who have this extreme free speech idea of social media. It's like, here we have the means by which to somewhat break our isolation that has come over us in this unexpected, strange way, not just because of COVID, but just because of the way we live. I can't even put my finger on it, but we are all just like constantly shrinking from each other. We could make connections, but there are people who, for whatever reason, like just want there to be like people throwing hand grenades in there and like fighting and insulting and causing, all kinds of trouble under the idea that this is like what political speech is, which is really stupid, but I don't get it. Sorry, I'm like getting off subject here.
No, but I was sorry.
Please.
I was thinking about like what you said. And I do think that is huge dynamic is sort of the can everybody just be cool, like is sort of a fundamental value. But I do think it is a major driver of why we end up sort of not like put in bubbles in the ideological sense, but more I think in the I'm increasingly just going to like deepen and widen the moat between me and other people, and install a drawbridge, because there are now so many spaces where at any moment you kind of are prepared for, here I am out in society, and the odds of someone not just being cool are really high, and I do not want to deal with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is just like straight up lack of eye contact, like socialization between human beings without any kind of physical presence just creates terrible stuff. Like, I mean, Facebook and Twitter, those things were like electronic versions of being in a car, people get into all these insane conflicts in cars basically because they can't like see each other. I mean, sure, you could get into a fight in person, but in cars, it happens all the time. And with people you would never imagine, because they just, something about like the lack of connection between people, the line of sight between you and another person where you can be like, okay, I recognize that you're a human being and I'm not going to like scream at you or threaten you, is missing. And I don't think it's like ever going to change on the internet. I think we just need to be together in real life, however that happens. But Rob, am I misremembering that there was a time when I was still living in Berkeley and you came to town because either your wife or your partner, she was going to go to grad school at Berkeley, and I remember like going out and getting beers and hanging out one day?
This is one of and this is why like I've always thought like you're an incredibly generous person. I know this because I was I was just starting out, and you were, I think, the only games journalist I knew of who was kind of in a similar position where your partner was an academic, and my partner was just about to start grad school, and we were sort of choosing between like Berkeley because she'd been accepted by UC Berkeley, and then it was also like MIT and Harvard. And so I just reached out to you over
such a hard decision to make, dude.
Well, it turns out it was. And by the way, here's the thing. The thing we're not prepared for is walking into grad school is like walking into a jet engine. Like, let me tell you, it did not all work out well in the old grad school department. It did eventually, but like it was a nightmare. So I just reached out to you like via the oneup.com mailbox and was like, hey, like I'd love to pick your brain about this. And so while we were out there for like campus visit, you and your wife just kind of showed up, met up with us, drove us to the Trappist.
Yeah, the Belgian place in Oakland. Yeah,
and like just sort of gave us the full download on grad student life, and also like I think gave us some really good advice, namely, don't come to Berkeley, because like I do think things were going to be hard no matter what, but you know, it was so easy back then to fall in love with Berkeley on the weekend visit and just be like, this is heaven. This is paradise. This is where I want to be. And I don't think we fully appreciate how unlivable it was going to be on like a starting freelancer and whatever dog shit stipend like Cal was offering at that point. And so like, you know, we had a long conversation that was in large measure sort of a reality check about like, yeah, you know, the like Berkeley has a great trailer, but the actual experience of it is not awesome. And I don't know if your feelings about it have changed since then, but I do remember like you sounded a pretty severe caution, and I think it was well taken. And we ended up in Boston.
I mean, it's a beautiful place. I miss California so much, and I would love the privilege of living there, but it is so insanely expensive. I actually just returned for the first time in like 8 years over the summer. And I just can't. I mean, it's basically the same place, but just the cost of living is obviously way out of control. And even like some of the culture stuff there has changed significantly. Like people don't even ride bikes there anymore. It's like super carred up. And I mean, Berkeley used to be the kind of place where getting caught at a traffic light by a 20-minute long procession of critical mass people on their bikes was just like, that's just one of the things that happens in Berkeley. Like you get a giant herd of bikes. And now, I mean, bikes were scarce. It was very strange. I love the Bay Area, but man, I mean, how it turned out was a real bummer, and you probably really dodged a bullet.
Yeah, I think we'd already missed like some of the last really good days to be in there, especially if you're on any sort of like a normal person budget. I think we got the last days like that in Cambridge, honestly, as well, because I went back to, you know, I get down to Boston fairly regularly, but a similar sort of, a lot of the tech money that was washing around Silicon Valley is also washed into Boston, and they built a lot of like extension like office campuses around like MIT. And so it also now like has the feeling of being a giant open air corporate campus in a lot of ways. And a lot of the places where like we had our lives, the places we went, you know, hung out with friends, and like a lot of that's kind of gone, to say nothing of the fact that a lot of people who we lived with in Boston at the time also moved on, because the same sort of like, you can't afford to stay in. You can, you know, your career takes you elsewhere, and you have an opportunity to go live somewhere far away, and your money will go further, and people do. And so suddenly, you know, you're in kind of a very expensive ghost town, which is
kind of and it's happening everywhere. The same thing happened. I went to school in Austin. When I go back to Austin, I mean, they just decapitated that place. It is very depressing to me to go there and see, like, you go to the Greyhound bus station, and in the middle of the summer there's like 100 homeless people without shoes, like camping out on the sidewalk, no place to go. It's brutally hot, and like 2 blocks away you can get your like $20 martini or whatever.
Yeah.
And in a town that used to just be, I paid $100 a month in college to live in the living room of an apartment, bills paid. Like I paid my rent by working at the school newspaper. You know, I'm not that old.
Yeah.
I'm 44 years old. It's not like ancient history, you know. It's just crazy to me, but you know, that's where we're at.
But yeah, no, and it always did mean a lot to us that like out of the blue, you like sort of checked your one up inbox, and we're like, yeah, I will meet with this random stranger.
Absolutely,
who definitely is not going to like try to rob me or something, or just be like, you know, do GFW bits with you for 2 hours over beers. So
I have met with a ton of people that way, and like 99.9% of the time it's super cool. So, and the like weird 1% is not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You just go to the bathroom and don't come back.
Good advice for life. I think I'm gonna leave it there. So the new episode, by the time people have listened to this, it should be up. And so people can find it if they just look up A Life Well Wasted in whatever is their podcast platform.
This is us giving Robert an additional
It's actually only on iTunes. It's fine. I'm fine with the I'm fine with the deadline. But it's only on iTunes. I've only ever put it on iTunes. I don't have an exclusive deal with Apple or anything. It's never been anywhere else. Maybe I'll put it elsewhere if people really need it to be elsewhere.
I think a lot of people are going to ask you to put it on Spotify. But you know what? You do you. You do you,
yeah,
Robert.
Man, I fucking hate Spotify. I'm not going to put it on Spotify. Fuck that. I'll put it on Spotify if Spotify gives me like $50,000. I'll put it on
There you go.
Spotify.
Hey, look, you just got to know, you got to put out the measures of your worth, and that's just what you've done here.
Sorry, A Life Well Wasted is such a great show. You have to jump through hoops to get it. I mean, I'll put it up somewhere else, but I'm not going to put it on Spotify. Sorry, guys.
Well, you can still get it through whatever your podcatcher probably is.
Oh yeah, no, it's a straight up MP3 file. You can go. Hilariously, our site exists in a previous time on the internet, practically, and you can just click the button on the web page and listen to it from whatever computer or from your phone. You don't need iTunes. So, and what do you got to subscribe? They come out like once every 9 years. Don't worry about it.
We will be sure to have you back in the next decade. Next time an episode drops, we'll be looking forward to sort of catch up with you again. And it's so exciting to have another episode of Life Well Wasted to look forward to. And it's awesome to see you like bringing this project back and putting more out.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with some listener questions, and then we'll call it a day. Back after this. Did y'all read a question about a Dare jacket?
A Dare jacket? Oh, before we get to that, the end of that interview, there's a very specific thing that I say Robert Ashley is going to do, and they're like, no, I will not do that.
He's done it.
Dear listener, Robert messaged me about a day ago from this recording. It's like, shit, I did it. So just Spotify. Sorry, the audience is too big. Anyway, continue.
So we are back to dip into the question bucket. I might have to just vanish at any moment because I now have the alert that Comcast is headed right for me. So we will
Rob,
see.
look out!
Oh no!
We'll just do this. I say we do this until you have to leave, and I can do the outro if you have to get up and leave.
So Antonio writes, I too won a Dare speech writing contest around 4th or 5th grade. I don't recall all the cringy propaganda I was spouting, but I do think I won because my speech had jokes in it. I also had to read my speech to an auditorium of parents, but despite my initial nerves, I suddenly felt empowered once I started getting some laughs. I made a joke involving Homer Simpson, and it somehow slayed. I'm sure it wasn't really all that hilarious, but I totally upstaged the girl who read her speech before me. But fuck her, because she grew up to be a lawyer running for Republican office in our old town. We all know Dare was fucking stupid, but I was kind of bought in at that young age. Like others, it took me many years to realize the real situation with over-policing and over-incarceration thanks to drug prohibition. The best part of this cringe moment of my youth was that one of my prizes for the speech was a Dare jacket. And there's a photo of me wearing it and posing that night. An over-the-shoulder head turn pose, complete with a shit-eating grin to show off the back of my prized jacket. I never actually wore that jacket once because even then I knew it was too nerdy and narky even for me, but that jacket might be somewhere at my mom's house. My question, if I find the jacket, do I bust it out and wear it these days, trusting it fits? That's a big leap, I think. But I would be embracing how far I've come as a stupid kid who now knows how dumb and indoctrinating all that shit was. Or am I risking people not getting the irony and thinking I might as well be wearing some fucking thin blue line flag type shit? Help me make or save me from these political fashion crimes. Fuck capitalism, fuck Dare, and hell yeah, ACAB. Best Antonio. So I think Dare is now just ironically funny.
Right.
Exactly. It would actually be revealing of people who looked at you lesser for wearing it, that says something more about them than it does about you. You're good. You're cool. The Dare jacket is very funny to wear. I didn't get one. I maybe got a t-shirt. I don't remember getting a jacket. I guess I could ask my mom for clarification on that point, but I would 100% wear the Dare jacket if I could.
Yeah.
Would it even fit you?
It's a
Probably
fourth
not. Well,
grade or
you
fifth
know
grade
what?
jacket.
Right.
Yeah, 5th grade jacket, probably not. I'm small, but I'm not that small. I am going to endeavor. I don't know. My mom has a big box of stuff, like any parent does. I am going to make a good faith effort over the holiday to see if my mom, it's the kind of thing you would keep, right? Like
Right.
you would absolutely keep a printed copy of that essay.
Oh
somewhere.
my God.
And so I have to, my mom is watching my kids in a couple of days. I will ask her if she thinks she has a copy of it. And if we do, because people know how far I have come, you know who I am. I promise
Wait, don't make any.
to read my Dare essay
Wow.
to you if I can find it.
Wow.
I'm willing to put myself out there. It's not my fault that I was
Not even making it like
They
indoctrinated
made
into
you do
propaganda.
this.
If I find it, I will read it.
I don't remember being given the option to take part in Dare shit. I just remember we all just did it.
Yeah, it was not an option. It was part of being in elementary school. It was gym class. It was music class. It was not a, hey, would you like to go learn about how not to do drugs? It was that and watching commercials of eggs being fried. That is the definition of that era of Dare.
It really prepared you for the moment when your friendship with people would be conditional on doing hard drugs with them, which turned out to never be the thing that happens. Everyone's getting like psyched up for like, okay. And so when a kid I thought was cool is like, hey, if you don't do this drug, you're lame. And then I'll be, oh no, I don't want to be lame, but because of Dare, I'm prepared for that moment. And the thing that nothing prepares you for is like, hey, you want to try this? It's awesome. And then you're like, oh, I don't know if I
That's
should.
way more pressure than
Come
being called a
on.
loser.
And it's like, come on. And I'm like, well, you did say it was awesome. And so that, like, again, they're training to fight the wrong war.
Who among us has not fallen to a good come on? Like, oh, come on.
Oh, come on.
Wait, does Dare still exist?
Yes. I did a Dare program.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, what?
I thought it was
I thought it was
Yeah,
mostly
we've
just
talked
a
about
program.
Yeah, I thought it was dying when I was doing it because I remember there being fewer, like each year, less and less.
I don't think it's as prevalent
through
as
my elementary school years.
as it used to be,
Yeah.
but it is definitely still
it's
a
bad.
thing. I wonder, would not be shocked if this is like a red state, blue state thing at this point, right? Like when you go to, went to school in Ohio, like leans red. I wouldn't be shocked, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's not a thing that like my kids experience in like a bluer state like Illinois, but that the more conservative your state, the more likely they are to tell you to dare to not do drugs.
I think that honestly, the Dare program was the lesser of the weird, fucked up programs that we had to go through in school. Like I had to go through much worse than a Dare program.
What did you go through?
I'm going to ask some tough questions here. Did anyone else's school have them do a sex ed program in like 8th grade?
Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
Well, no. Let me finish the sentence. Where they showed you pictures of babies born with gonorrhea in their eyes.
What?
No.
What?
No.
What?
That's
What?
no.
I mean, definitely I remember seeing gonorrhea or like showing STDs to try and freak you out. But I can't remember. I don't think it was as specific as seeing babies.
No.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing STDs. The baby thing is a step further.
What the
Yeah,
fuck?
the baby thing was that haunts me to this day. I think about that like not infrequently that I did have to see that. It was I'll be honest, a troubling image.
Yeah. I'm not Googling
Hey, this
that.
happens to
I don't need that in my
everyone.
brain.
All of you saw this.
Yes, we all had to see it.
I did
folks,
not. Either that or I was
the-
traumatized and blocked it.
Listen,
Dare is
Gordon-
having a sale on its website
Really?
right now. So
Don't give Dare money.
Yeah, see, mostly
if you wanted to get this sick insulated jacket,
Oh my
it's
god.
only $63 right now. You know,
No, see, this isn't even the right thing. It's got to have the big Dare.
can I buy it?
across
Can I
the
buy
back.
used Dare jackets on
God, it looks
eBay?
like-
that's
Probably.
fine, right? That's morally
Oh,
correct.
This sucks. These suck.
These all
I
are
don't know.
Looking
bad.
at these. These dare jackets are dripless.
No,
this sucks.
but
Get
hang
the fuck
on,
out of
check
here.
out the
Oh,
shirt.
so, okay, this is
Captain
what we're
Darren.
talking about. Hold on. This I have to imagine this is the jacket that is being discussed.
Yes.
It's
yes,
a bomber
yes.
jacket.
Yeah. Dare to resist
buying
drugs
this
and
from-
violence.
Yeah, buying this, this is just going to a
Oh
person.
man, what if the dude from Drive was really into making positive life choices?
Oh my god.
This is great.
This is gorgeous.
This is terrific.
That's beautiful. That's the right thing, yeah.
No, this is. I would
60.
100% buy this. The joy I would get
Shit.
from buying this bomber jacket, and then like, ugh, delicious.
Buy it now? I'm thinking about it. I'm going to close this website. I'm going to close this website.
Patrick. All right, Patrick, I have a very important question for you.
Yeah.
Did you see this email about Labyrinth? And have you reserved it for the end of year discussion?
No, we have not done Labyrinth.
Okay. Patrick, if you're still soliciting short runtime GOTY considerations and have access to a VR headset, if I recall correctly, you do.
I do.
You should
I have too
check
many of
out
them.
Walkabout Mini Golf. It's a profoundly solid and inventive mini golf sim and a great time in general, but it came out last year. But for 2022 consideration, download the Jim Henson's Labyrinth DLC released this July. It's $3.
What?
This is an official sanctioned mini golf treatment of the story and environments of Labyrinth.
What?
Treated with a sort of care and production value that projects a player into an alternate world where mini golf
Oh my
courses, not theme parks,
God.
turned out to be the apex family entertainment destination, and where Labyrinth got the lasting cultural cachet it deserved. Completing the main 18-hole course should take about 30 minutes. A little extra time hunting, following a walkthrough for hidden balls, or going for an under par run through the course unlocks a hard mode with remixed holes, reworked scenes, and a scavenger hunt story, all of which focus on the Goblin King's attempted seduction of Sarah in mini
This
golf.
is amazing.
Holy
This
shit.
is really well done. I dropped a link to it in the chat, and it's exceptionally, like, the aesthetic is awesome.
The 20,000 Leagues and Missed
This is
Courses are also
gorgeous.
cool as heck, but they aren't as surprising. And yes, the golf kicks ass too. Thank you, Alex in Seattle. Holy shit.
Shit. You have to play this
Okay.
in VR?
Yeah, I think so.
God damn
All right, let me
it.
see if I
The
can
list of like cool experiences that only exist in VR is increasing.
I hate
Mhm.
that for me.
I know. I'm hoping the PlayStation VR 2 kind of resolves a lot of my conundrum.
Yeah,
Okay,
VR only. Fuck.
I'm downloading this to my Quest at the moment. I'll check it out. I don't know if it'll be in time for GOTY. My schedule is very compressed over the next 48 hours, but I will endeavor to check it out at least over the holidays.
Last question here,
You're not
Sebastian.
downloading it to play it between this recording and the next one.
And the next recording, yeah. Well, I am not
30
committing.
minutes.
It's 30
I am
minutes.
not committing. I am not committing to the list that I say on that podcast to being the list that publishes on the website.
Yeah.
It's a rough draft.
Yeah.
Last email comes from Sebastian from Minnesota. After recently finishing Narrative Banger Pentiment, it's gotten me to rethink my previous thought of general European history as being a bit boring. I imagine that's partly due to American education, where only the very broadest strokes were taught. My question, has a game ever shifted your opinion on a particular setting? On the flip side, is there a setting you'd love for a video game to do that to you?
Huh. I feel like it's usually the opposite of like something will attract me about a setting or something to the game.
I feel like a lot of people
So,
ended
like-
up turning into Nobunaga Oda fans, though.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that's kind of like, I think that series is out there being like, you know what's cool? Nobunaga.
See, for me, when I think about this question, it's more less that it flips me into a fan, as more as, is it compelling enough that I'm willing, like I'm somehow able to get into a setting that otherwise I find uninteresting, right? Like Skyrim, a game I adored, spent like 200 hours in. Like fantasy does not nothing for me. It's a negative. It is dragging back. Like it is negative interest in the setting. It's why I like hearing about Game of Thrones. Like, oh, cool. Like dragons sounds great. I've saved a bunch of time. And then, I ended up getting into it because it was actually much more like grounded political world about relationships. But fantasy in general is one that does zero for me. And so when I managed to play a game that draws me into that setting because of its world and its characters, I always find that to be pretty remarkable. I don't have a good explanation for it. It's not like I had a bad experience with fantasy growing up, but it's just like wizards and spells it just doesn't, like, if it was sci-fi wizards, I'm in. Like, let's go. Like, you only need a slight tweak to the setup and then I'm engaged. But if they're like this is like really reductionist, but if it's sci-fi and it's fantasy, I'll take sci-fi every time, and fantasy just doesn't do it for me.
So I will say that Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within, really made me interested in the process of German unification and the rise of Prussia, because a huge part of that game is like, how deep does this werewolf situation in Bavaria go?
I was going to say, isn't that the werewolf one? I remember playing that game at my
what if I told
my cousin's house because they had a computer powerful enough for the FMV.
Things kind of center on a cursed family of werewolves. And the implication of that game, if I recall correctly, and the game also gets kind of into the history of like German opera, etc. But one of the implications is that like King Ludwig of Bavaria is basically driven mad because Prussian Foreign Minister Bismarck used a hot werewolf honey trap to ruin Ludwig's life, and basically like deployed this like super hot charismatic werewolf to seduce Ludwig and like turn him into a werewolf, and causing him to unravel and realize like, oh man, like I can't be king of Bavaria anymore. In fact, we should all just be Germans. But like, I was like, wow, this is pretty wild. Like Germany didn't exist back then. What the hell's this? And so it was like kind of stunning to me, where I was like, wait, like Germany's new-ish? Didn't seem like it would be new, but there it is. And so like, yeah, because of all this like hunting the werewolf and like, ooh, they're so hot and they altered the course of history. I was like, I got to learn more about this history.
I have the inverse. I don't know if a game has ever turned me on a setting, but Hunt Showdown was a game that I was not super interested in, but I have a deep and abiding love for the literature of the American, like literature centered around the American South, and like the complicated history of the American South. And so Hunt Showdown absolutely got me in the door by just understanding those aesthetics really well, and then having a bunch of good lore.
Speaking of getting in the door, Comcast is in the building.
All right, Rob is going to log off, and I will take us out of this podcast. It's great. We got through the end of the question. Yeah. That's great. All right, Rob. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll take care of the rest. Yeah, that is going to do it for this episode of Waypoint Radio. That is going to do it for the main Waypoint Radio podcast for the year. That is not the end of podcasts for the year. We're going to have, as you might have already put together, a Game of the Year podcast where we're going to do sort of a round robin of our top 10s, including some categories suggested by the audience. We are going to finally get to a Elden Ring spoiler cast. Those will kind of, do you have the calendar in front of you?
I'm actually opening it up. Went to go open it up, and then Asana was like, hey, you have to log in again. So it's logging in.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, so
but those roll out through through the rest of the
Yes.
year, right? Like, so
We've got
we'll have
currently
both-
on the list is Elden Ring for the Friday the 23rd, and our game of the year will drop on the 30th. Some pre New Year's Eve listening for y'all.
Yeah. And we also, I think we are going to unlock for the main feed when Waypoint Plus launched. Before it launched, we got together and did an After Dark with Austin talking about sort of like I was about to say 6 years of Waypoint, but that was not true at the time. We have since come forward in time since then. But just kind of about the history of the site, where we were. And then we recorded another After Dark after the launch of Waypoint Plus. And so we're going to unlock those for the main feed if you're someone that has not listened to those, and get a little more Dawson Walker in your life, which is always good for everyone. And that'll be kind of what takes us through the at the end of the year. We had hoped to get to My Turn's episode on nostalgia, but the week just kind of got away from us. And rather than trying to rush it and not having a quality discussion, we thought that would make it holiday viewing, and we'll get to that the first week of January when we're back. So if you haven't watched it yet, you've got a little more time to check that out before we discuss that film early in the new year. But otherwise, that is going to bring us to the end of the show. This podcast is brought to you by Waypoint Plus. You can get an ad-free version of this podcast over at waypointplus.com. We just finished having a sale where you got a discount. You can try that code Way Holiday. I don't know. Maybe you can break the system and still get the discount. I can't stop you.
Don't give them false hope.
pasting it over and over again. But you can still sign up for Waypoint Plus over at waypointplus.com. You help us. You help me be able to do streams like Cyberpunk. You help us do My Turn. You get exclusive episodes like Manhunting, which I think is actually getting close to the end of its run. I think there's only a couple of films left, although I suppose Michael Mann is still here, so the Manhunters would still get together to talk about. He has a Ferrari movie coming out next year, right? I think.
Yeah, he's doing something.
Remember, but he's still making
stuff.
He's doing something. Our theme music is by Bowen. The track is Miss You off the EP Pale Machine. You can learn more at waypoint.zone/Bowen. You can follow my work at Patrick Klepek. Ren, where can people follow you?
At Ren or Raven.
Kato.
At A_Kato_appears.
You can follow Rob's. I'm sure there will be many mice tweets over the course of this coming couple of weeks over at Rob Zachney. I was trying to see if we. Oh, and we also we didn't write anything this week, but we did put up an excellent piece by Matthew Weiss called "The Horror That From Software Lost Between Demon Souls and Elden Ring," kind of exploring the themes and aesthetics of that series over time. So make sure to go and check that out. But that's us calling time on Waypoint Radio for the year. We made it through another year. We made it through another year of Vice. All those things are not necessarily always a guarantee. And I'm not the person who makes these decisions. I don't crunch all of these numbers, but I have to imagine that a huge reason we're still here recording these thoughts into microphones, releasing them into the world, is because of the wonderful and loyal audience that has been behind Waypoint since the beginning, before we were Waypoint, and then became Waypoint and launched things like Waypoint Plus. So thank you to all of you who continue to listen and support us. We can't do it without you, and we're looking forward to a whole nother year of saying, fuck capitalism, go home. All right, so the last thing before Rob will take us in is we go to a website called time.is, which is just a way of, we just clap at a number, and that's just a way of having a second backup in terms of the timing for Kato to align things. So
Time.is.
Time.is.
Oh, I like the design of this site.
Yeah, it's got lots of different fonts. Some big, some are small.
Well, and then the pop-ups happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. This is some trashy shit. All right, here we go.
All right, let's clap at 40 seconds. All right. Rob, do you want to take us away?
Absolutely. I'm on time.is.
I'm on top. That is.
I am hitting record. I hit record.
All right. 30
I'm
seconds.
ready.
30 seconds. Kato, 30 seconds. Okay. I don't know what Kato just
Wait.
did there.
Hold on. Something's wrong.
Oh, did the non-clap fail
no
somehow?
way.
Oh, gee. If
It's
only there'd
not
been
bad, it's
something,
not bad.
an audio signature could have
Setting.
put on
Tell
the
us
track.
that if it wasn't that. There's
Oh,
no
oh
way
God,
for us to
you're
know. You would
robots.
cover your own
Hold on,
fucking
I'll get
tracks
back.
if your backup wasn't it.
Hold on there. Okay, wait.
Oh my god, they died.
Oh, more profound technical issues.
We bullied Kato out of the call.
Did that fix it? Hello.
Well, there was
That
nothing
fixed
wrong
what?
on our
Great,
end.
great. No, I'm
All right.
talking to myself.
Uh-huh.
It fixed it. Y'all sounded like haunted spell, Mr. What is it called, Mr. Spell and Speak? That toy.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. That's
I don't
why-
remember
that's
this
why I
toy.
ruled. That's where you could type in words and it would talk back to you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Spell and speak.
It was the only reason I knew it existed is because of Toy Story.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. So do we need to clap again?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Man, Kato. The audio looks so clean.
Ooh. What changed?
Moved everything apart.
Oh, good.
Cables don't touch.
Why would you even say something like this? just record. Just like luxuriate it in your. Much like I wear the Kirkland sweatshirt. Don't call attention to it. Like the fact that you've called
Yes.
attention to your.
No, I need
your
I need to grab my dubs.
Oh
Life,
yeah,
life
you are
gets
in a
two of
bad.
them.
You are in a bad place.
I'm in a
All right,
bad
let's
place.
go. Let's go.
All right.
We need to do this.
All right.